Chapter 245. Zhang Yan didn't expect the water element true light to be so powerful. Once it was released, it swept away the devilish aura. At this moment, when he raised his head, he saw the clouds in the sky had dispersed, the wind had stopped, and the rain had stopped. The sky was already as cold as jade, the leaden color had faded away, and the bright sun was in the sky. Sun, shao, shua, net, / he turned his head and saw Yan Yuo standing in the distance. He sneered, so it was fellow Yan who was behind this. As his voice sounded out, he had already flung open his sleeves and flew over on a cloud. Yan Yuo felt a huge force pulling her, as if there was a boundless water rolling over. It made her sway left and right, as if she would fall into a huge whirlpool if she was not careful. She only managed to stabilize herself after resisting with all her might. Now that she was shouted at by Zhang Yan, she looked a little flustered and hurriedly waved the Yin Fiend Corpse burial banner in her hand. No matter how hard she waved, the banner seemed to have lost its spirituality and did not react at all. She could not help but turn pale with fright. When her expression fell into Zhang Yan's eyes, he snorted coldly. Yan Yuo thought that the hundreds of Yin corpses were destroyed by the light screen, so they wanted to reform. However, she didn't know that the Yin corpses didn't dissipate, but were all sucked into the water attribute profound light. This light was a 5-element true light that Zhang Yan cultivated by relying on the 9th-10th water essence, and there was a myriad of rivers and streams within it that overlapped and curved. So long as one was swept by this true light, then if one was unable to resist it, one would fall within it and be unable to find a way out for a long time. The cultivation of these 300 Yin corpses was not as strong as before. After being swept by his water light, they were all drawn into it. Within this true light, the rivers and streams could change according to Zhang Yan's thoughts. Even if someone were to strike fiercely within it, the person would be obstructed by the layers of rivers. Unless the person's cultivation in the profound technique far surpassed Zhang Yan's, only then would the person be able to break through the true light with brute force. But then again, Zhang Yan wouldn't easily drag such a person inside. Now that Zhang Yan had not reached the core transformation realm, he could not use the full power of this true light. If he had profound cultivation one day, this true light would be like an ocean that could contain all the water in the world. When facing an enemy, he only needed to release this true light to sweep thousands of troops and shake the mountains. Yan Yuo's Yin Fiend Corpse burial banner was her biggest reliance. Now that it had suddenly lost its magical power, she panicked when she saw Zhang Yan rushing towards her. She hurriedly took out her mirror and chanted a spell. The mirror flashed and a beam of light that was as bright as snow fell down. Zhang Yan moved his fingers and attracted the golden hammers. With a slight movement, it released a golden light. 2 golden balls the size of a wicker basket spun continuously in front of him, stirring up the smoke and opening up a path. Every time a dazzling white light shone, it was firmly blocked by the head of the hammers, unable to shine on him. / advertisement for full text TXT download in the blink of an eye, he had already charged to within 10 feet of Yan Yuo. His figure didn't stop as he threw a punch forward. In an instant, a thunderous cyclone shot through the sky. Yan Yuo turned pale when she saw Zhang Yan's ferocious attack. She lifted her skirt and spun to the side to avoid it. However, she was careless and was brushed by the cyclone, causing her to lose her balance. Fortunately, she was a veteran of hundreds of battles. In such a critical moment, she was able to keep her composure. She quickly grabbed a hairpin on her head with 2 of her slender fingers and pulled it out. "Quick!" she shouted. A ray of light shot out from her palm like a golden snake and pierced towards Zhang Yan's eyes. Without checking to see if it hit, she borrowed the momentum of her charge to wave her sleeves. The crimson ground silk shoes under her feet tapped lightly on the cloud and she was about to escape on a ray of light. Zhang Yan flicked his sleeve and slapped the hairpin away. His figure slowed down for a moment before he stood up again to give chase. Just now, Yan Yuo was in the air when a green cloud suddenly floated over and blocked her way. She quickly turned around and wanted to escape to another place. However, no matter how fast she dodged, the green cloud moved even faster and entangled her like maggots on a tarsal bone. In the blink of an eye, she changed her position several times, but her escape route was always blocked by the green cloud. In the blink of an eye, she saw the green-clothed young man standing on a cloud and sneering at her, and then he flicked his sleeve and returned to the azure cloud. She gnashed her teeth in hatred, and when she turned around to look, she saw Zhang Yan had caught up as well. She instantly knew that the opportunity to escape was lost, so she had no choice but to turn around and slap out a scorching flame that was like a lotus flower towards Zhang Yan. Zhang Yan raised his hands and pushed. 2 golden hammers flew forward and smashed the firelight with a bang. Then, the hammers smashed towards the woman. Yan Yuyo was in a hurry and couldn't dodge, so she struggled to prop up the mysterious light. A ball of bright red firelight as bright as the sun shone and dyed the surrounding clouds red like blood. These 2 golden hammers weren't ordinary magic treasures, but divine weapons forged from metal essence. They possessed great strength and possessed the might to shake mountains. As soon as they descended on the profound light, it seemed as if a corner of a mountain peak had collapsed, causing flames to scatter in all directions and red clouds to scatter. The profound light was destroyed with a single strike. Yan Yuyo only heard a loud noise in her eardrums, causing her chest to feel stuffy and short of breath. She knew that this was not good. She twisted her body and dodged. She only felt a strong wind sweeping across the sky while the other one brushed past her back. Her body went limp and her vision went black. She opened her mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. Although she was injured, her mind was still clear. She knew that she couldn't delay for even a moment, otherwise, she would die. She forced herself to raise her chi and swept her sleeve, releasing a ball of scorching red flame. Zhang Yan casually swatted it away. He strode forward and punched again. Yan Yuyo felt a strong wind blowing on her face. Her eyelids hurt as if they were about to burst into tears. She quickly raised her hand and gathered the scattered firelight into a ball. Then, she hurriedly threw it down to block the attack. The air and fire collided with each other, twisting and tearing at each other. After a muffled explosion, sparks flew in all directions, and the light of the flames dissipated. Although Yan Yuyo managed to block the attack, she was hit by an invisible wave of chi and was forced to retreat a few steps. Her hair was disheveled and fluttered in the wind, blocking her vision. Yan Yuyo bit her lips tightly and shook her head, causing her beautiful hair to flutter up. Then, she forced out a wisp of flame from the tip of her finger. She steeled her heart and simply burned off a chunk of this hindering beautiful hair, revealing her pale and beautiful face. She looked up and saw Zhang Yan striding towards her like a divine general. His aura was fierce, as if he could crush anything in front of him. She didn't feel like her aura was stolen. She knew that she wouldn't be able to stop him with ordinary techniques. She thought to herself, if I don't injure him, I won't be able to escape this time. She changed her mind and came up with an idea. She pretended to be seriously injured and secretly formed a spell, waiting for Zhang Yan to catch up. Zhang Yan was a veteran of hundreds of battles and had sharp reflexes. When he saw that she suddenly stopped moving, he felt something was wrong and slowed down his pace. Yan Yuyo saw that Zhang Yan had the intention to stop and thought that he had seen through her. She became anxious and stopped waiting. With a clear and crisp sound, the teardrop-shaped sparkling red jade on her forehead suddenly shattered, turning into a wisp of white smoke that flew out. Its speed was as fast as lightning, and in the blink of an eye, it had already flown in front of Zhang Yan. Zhang Yan was alarmed. He didn't take it head-on. Instead, he waved his sleeve and only used the corner of his robe to deflect the smoke. He looked down and saw a layer of black gas wriggling on the corner of his robe. It was very strange, and there was indeed a secret behind it. Fortunately, the robe he was wearing was the treasure robe that he got from Xiao Han, so the gas couldn't penetrate it. He sneered and stepped forward. When he was in front of Yan Yuyo, he swung his hammer at her. Yan Yuyo saw that this method was useless against Zhang Yan. She lost all will to fight. Seeing the golden hammer coming down, she quickly pulled out the sword from her waist to block. But the hammer was like a mountain pressing down on her, a huge force was transmitted and the sword flew out of her hand. Her body trembled, her body swayed and she retreated several steps. She felt a sweet taste in her throat and could not help but spurt out a mouthful of blood. Zhang Yan didn't let her go. The golden hammer in his hand swept across her waist. Yan Yuyo didn't have time to dodge and hurriedly pulled the banner in front of her to block. Zhang Yan's hammer swept up a gust of evil wind, and when the hammer struck down, a "kacha" sound was heard, and the Yin Fiend corpse peace banner was broken. As the banner fell, a withered skeleton seemed to rise from the miserable fog. It opened its mouth silently and seemed to say something. In the blink of an eye, it disappeared without a trace. Seeing the banner destroyed, Yan Yuyo suddenly let out a scream. She felt that she had lost all hope. She stared at Zhang Yan with resentment and screamed, "Li Yuanba, I won't die in your hands." She made a hand sign and her cheeks suddenly turned bright red. With a "hu" sound, countless sparks came out from her eyes, ears, mouth, and nose. The fire fiercely increased, and her entire body exploded into a cloud of blood mist. A gentle breeze blew over, and she disappeared without a trace. Zhang Yan was startled and nodded. He had rarely seen a cultivator commit suicide since he started cultivating. That was because even in a crisis, a cultivator would rather take the risk than give up that slim chance of survival. This woman's action could be considered unyielding. Not far away, the green cloud trembled like ripples. A young man in green walked out and said to Zhang Yan, "Li Yuanba, I can't beat you right now. I'm afraid that if we continue to fight, it will be difficult to determine the winner in a short period of time. Why don't we fight another day? What do you think?" Without waiting for Zhang Yan to speak, he laughed and said, "If you think you can beat me, feel free to come and try." Just now when he was recuperating, he was swept by that water element true light and felt his breathing was unstable, as if he was about to fall into that light. He thought that it was a magical weapon in Zhang Yan's hand, and he thought that with his current broken body, if he continued to fight, he would definitely not be able to take down Zhang Yan. Therefore, he wanted to stop the battle and wait for the day when his body was mended before fighting again. Zhang Yan didn't want to kill this person at the moment. The fire in his chest was burning and he wanted to find a place to cultivate. Moreover, he didn't know how many acupoints this fire could burn. If it wasn't enough, he would have to look for opportunities from this person. Therefore, this suggestion was also in line with his intentions. He smiled and said, "If fellow Taoist is fine, you and I will meet here in half a month's time. At that time, we will decide the winner." The green-clothed young man was straightforward. He shouted, "It's decided then." He swung his sleeve and soared into the sky on a green cloud. Zhang Yan was not in a hurry to leave. He stood quietly in the cloud for a moment and pointed to the ground. He dug up a pit and buried all the scattered relics that Yan Yuyo left behind. Then, he swung his sleeve and covered them up. Only then did he fly away. Not long after, he returned to the vicinity of the nine-headed peak. After circling around the cave dwelling that he built earlier, he didn't see any trace of Shigong. He must have found a place to hide. Now that he had the Zoisha ancestor's body, there was no need to look for him. In this Green Inch Mountain, there were very few people who could threaten him. Thus, he did not have the patience to go anywhere else. He sat down in the cave and pointed to a huge rock to seal the cave door. Then, he activated the ball of fire in his body. Target equals _blank. Chapter 246. Zhang Yan sat on a rock, the fire in his qi was burning brightly like the sun. He slowly moved the fire towards one of the acupuncture points. In just a moment, he suddenly felt the acupoint jump, as if it had broken free from some shackles and opened a gate. A wisp of yang qi, like a golden thread, was carefully drawn out by him and merged with the true fire. The fire had been nourished by the essence qi and was now bright, illuminating his qi. At this moment, there was an additional spark, but it didn't seem to have changed. Zhang Yan didn't think too much about it and only focused on silently circulating the technique, moving the fire at a moderate speed. Not long after, his body trembled slightly, and in a moment, he had burned through another acupuncture point. There was no joy or sorrow on his face, and there was not the slightest change in his expression. He guided the yang qi down and guided it into the fire, then moved it to the next acupuncture point. As the fire broke through the acupuncture points one after another, he felt a spring of warm water flowing in his chest. All the meridians in his body, the pores in his heart, were all relaxed. Unknowingly, he was immersed in it, unaware of the sun and moon, the rotation of day and night. Suddenly, one day, he felt the fire slow down, as if it had encountered a layer of obstruction. It was no longer as smooth as before, so his body shook and he woke up from his meditation. He let out a long breath of turbid air, and after a careful examination, he was pleasantly surprised to find that out of the 36 acupuncture points, he had burned through 16 of them in one go. He estimated the time, and found that only 13 days had passed. The speed of his progress was much faster than what he had expected. If it was an ordinary cultivator, to burn through so many acupuncture points, it would be impossible to think about it in less than a few years, so it was obvious that this path was feasible. He looked at the true fire and saw that it was very different from before. After absorbing a lot of yang qi, its color was even purer, refined like fat. It was like a fine jade flame without any impurities. It lay quietly in his qi sea like a long lamp, its splendor was harmonious, gentle and clear. In another 2 days, it would be time for him to fight with the green-clothed youth again. He was no longer in a hurry to cultivate. He smiled slightly and withdrew the fire breath. He only adjusted his qi and sat quietly to rest. After another day, he suddenly heard someone shouting outside the cave, "Is fellow Taoist Li here?" Zhang Yan opened his eyes and shouted, "Who's outside?" The voice outside said respectfully, "I'm Ho Mao. That day, I met you in front of this cave abode." Zhang Yan thought for a moment and remembered this person. He raised his hand and moved the large stone in front of the door away. He said, "Fellow Taoist, please come in and meet me." A figure flashed in front of the cave, and Ho Sanlang walked in. When he saw Zhang Yan, he went forward and cupped his hands, saying, "Sanlang greets Taoistly." Zhang Yan glanced at him and saw that he was indeed the follower who accompanied the green-clothed youth that day. He said, "There's still one more day before I fight with that green-clothed fellow. Since fellow Taoist Ho came here, does that fellow have a message for you?" Ho Sanlang shook his head and said, "That's not the case. I came here without telling that old monster." "Oh." When the two words, "old monster," came out, Zhang Yan's eyes narrowed. He heard a trace of surprise. He looked at Ho Sanlang meaningfully, then pointed to the side and said, "Fellow Taoist, sit down and talk." Ho Sanlang did not stand on ceremony. He cupped his hands and sat on the stone bench. With a smile on his face, he said, "I came here today for a matter that will benefit both you and me." Zhang Yan smiled faintly. Ho Sanlang saw that Zhang Yan's expression was indifferent, but he did not care. He was very confident that the bait he threw out would definitely move the other party. He chuckled and said, "I saw that fellow Taoist is at a disadvantage in your fight with that old monster. If fellow Taoist wants to defeat him tomorrow, it will be extremely difficult." At this point, he smiled mysteriously and said, "However, I can lend fellow Taoist a hand and eliminate this devil." When Zhang Yan heard this, he already knew the other party's intention. However, at this moment, he only wanted to borrow the strength of the green-clothed youth to strengthen the true fire in his body and burn through the 36 acupoints. At least for now, he had no intention of killing this person. However, he did not mind listening to Ho Sanlang's plan, so he smiled slightly and said, "I wonder how fellow Taoist can help me." Ho Sanlang saw that Yang Kai's expression did not seem to be enthusiastic and thought that Yang Kai did not believe him. He hurriedly said, "Fellow Taoist, do you still remember the spirit shuttle that the old monster used during the fierce battle with you that day?" Zhang Yan raised his eyebrows and said, "Fellow Taoist, are you talking about that flying fish-shaped magic treasure? Yes. Ho Sanlang's voice unconsciously rose a little, and then he sighed and said, this treasure is called the Five Spirits White Carp Shuttle. It is a profound weapon. I am ashamed to say that this treasure originally belonged to me. However, I was plotted against by that old monster and had no choice but to listen to his manipulation. As a result, this treasure was also taken by that old monster. At this point, he laughed lowly and said, however, I'm afraid that the old monster did not expect that there was a trace of true qi imprinted in this treasure, and it is not that easy to refine. As long as I am willing, I can retrieve this magic treasure at any time and use it again. Fellow Taoist, why don't you think about it? If I suddenly counterattack at a critical moment during your battle with that old monster, the old monster will definitely not be on guard. Zhang Yan glanced at Ho Sanlang's proud appearance and thought that this person could be considered to be somewhat scheming. He said, I believe that fellow Taoist will not help me for no reason. Ho Sanlang laughed heartily and said, of course. To tell you the truth, the old devil once injected a strange energy into my body. This energy can devour flesh and blood essence. Every 3 to 5 days, the old devil needs to resolve this energy, so I have no choice but to be imprisoned by him. If fellow Taoist can help me get rid of this energy, I promise to lend you a hand in tomorrow's battle. Zhang Yan's eyes flashed, and he said, why is fellow Taoist so sure that I can remove this strange energy? Ho Sanlang stared unblinkingly at Zhang Yan and said in a deep voice, fellow Taoist has fought with that old monster several times, but you are not afraid of his methods. I have also seen this with my own eyes, so I guessed that fellow Taoist must have a secret technique. Thus, I decided to come here and earnestly ask for fellow Taoist's help. Ho Mao, thank you. After he finished speaking, he stood up and bowed. He was also a meticulous person. If the strange energy of the green-clothed youth could really do anything to Zhang Yan, then there was no need to go to him. He only needed to wait for the other party to be corroded by the energy. Zhang Yan said playfully, but why do I feel that there is no need to go through so much trouble? Wouldn't it be better for fellow Taoist to directly tell me the technique? Ho Sanlang frowned, sensing that something was wrong. However, he had already made preparations before coming here. The other party was a strength cultivator, so his speed was not fast. Even if they fought, he could escape in time, so he was not afraid that the other party would turn hostile. He sneered, fellow Taoist, are you confused? This technique is my foundation, why would I tell you it for nothing? Zhang Yan laughed mockingly, and said, when I see that green-clothed fellow tomorrow, I only need to mention this matter. How do you think he will deal with you? Ho Sanlang was shocked, and pointed at him, how can you do this? Zhang Yan smiled, and said, why can't I do this? Cold sweat dripped down Ho Sanlang's forehead. He never thought that Zhang Yan would turn around and threaten him. It looked like he was the one who purposely handed his weakness to the other party, and he immediately regretted it. But he could not be blamed for this. He was anxious to escape from the green-clothed young man, and he would cling to it even if there was a life-saving straw. He had no other choice, and now that he saw that Zhang Yan had the ability to resist the old monster, he could only come to him for help. Moreover, he originally thought that after Zhang Yan seized the Zoisha ancestor's body, he would fight the old monster to the death. If there was a way to defeat the old monster, he would definitely grasp it firmly and work together with him. Even before this, he was still full of confidence. But he never thought that today, he would use this as a threat to seize his lifeline. Ho Sanlang was furious for a long time, but he finally remembered something. His mind unconsciously calmed down, and he slowly sat down again, and said in a low voice, if fellow Taoist does this, you will definitely regret it. Zhang Yan was not in a hurry to force him, but looked at him with interest, and asked, why? Ho Sanlang coldly asked in reply, has fellow Taoist heard of the Shao clan of the Giant House? Zhang Yan's eyebrows raised. In the East Hua continent, there were countless profound gate families, and there were also many Shao clan. However, there was only one that could truly be called a giant house. He said, Could it be the Chinsang school? Ho Sanlang straightened his body and said loudly, yes, it is. He pointed at himself and said, to be honest, fellow Taoist, the Shao clan and my Ho clan are in-laws. This spirit shuttle was originally given by the Shao clan, and they asked my clan to capture someone for them. If you harm me, not only will you not be able to obtain this treasure, but they will also not let you go. At this point, he could only use the Shao clan's name to threaten Zhang Yan. When Zhang Yan heard this, he keenly felt that there was more to it than meets the eye. He wanted to find out more, so he snorted and purposely said, what a joke. Let's not talk about whether your Ho clan is in-laws with the Shao clan, but if the Shao clan wants to capture someone, why don't they do it themselves? Why would they bestow a profound artifact to a mere profound light realm cultivator like you? I don't believe you, so don't try to scare me. Ho Sanlang's expression couldn't help but change when he heard Qin Lai's words. He hesitated for a moment before saying, fellow Taoist, please listen to me. Because that person's identity is special, it is inconvenient for the Shao clan to personally make a move. This matter is absolutely true. My life is small, but I'm afraid that fellow Taoist will ruin the Shao clan's plans. How could they let it go? He said these words unwillingly, but he had already made up his mind. If he could make it out of Mount Green Inch this time, he would definitely persuade his uncle to kill this person so that the news wouldn't leak out. When Zhang Yan heard this, his heart jumped slightly. However, he was very shrewd, so his expression didn't change. He only said, so, you came to this formation to find that person? That's right. Ho Sanlang was annoyed and said, I originally thought that the azure-clothed person was that person, but I didn't think that I would be wrong. Zhang Yan's eyes flashed, but he said nonchalantly, is that person called Zhang Yan? Ho Sanlang didn't think and blurted out, yes. He suddenly reacted and raised his head, but he was met with a pair of heart-piercing cold eyes. His heart trembled, and he knew that the situation was bad. He shouted and turned into a ray of light to escape. Zhang Yan snorted coldly, but he didn't move from his spot. When he formed a seal, a large yellow hand reached out and grabbed forward. In this narrow abode, Ho Sanlang practically had no room to maneuver, and in the blink of an eye, he was caught up and grabbed by this large hand. He was horrified and hurriedly released the profound light from his body with the intention of resisting, but unexpectedly, this large hand suddenly turned down and spread open its fingers, slapping him to the ground with a bang as if it was swatting a mosquito. He died on the spot without making a sound. Target =_. Chapter 247. Zhang Yan flipped the black-yellow hand and rolled up the soil and stones, burying Ho Sanlang's body. Although this person knew the key to using the 5-spirit white carp shuttle, Zhang Yan did not take it to heart. Since this treasure belonged to the Shao clan, why would they really lend it to the Ho clan? There was a high chance that they had left something behind, so even if he got it, it would be useless. As for how to defeat the green-clothed youth, he also had a plan in mind and did not need the help of this treasure, so he was not greedy. As for the Shao clan, he did not need to worry. From Ho Sanlang, he knew that the Shao clan seemed to be worried about something and did not dare to come out to find him openly, so they handed this matter over to the Ho clan to carry out in secret. And the Ho clan was probably limited by their small clan, so they did not know where he was. This time, it was only because of the Baoji conference that they attracted him. Zhang Yan understood that as long as he was careful and did not easily reveal his identity, they would not be able to find him. Right now, the only thing that mattered was to increase his cultivation level. Once he became a core formation cultivator and returned to the sect, with his identity as a direct disciple, his status would be like heaven and earth compared to before. Even if he did not say anything, the master and disciples would take the initiative to protect him, and would not allow the families in the sect to cause trouble for him. He thought for a while, then put aside his thoughts and sat quietly in the cave for a day and night. When the day broke, it was the appointed time. He got up and walked out of the cave, fluttered his sleeves, stepped on a cloud, and flew away. Not long after, he arrived at the place where he fought with the green-clothed youth half a month ago. After circling around, he saw that the person was not there, so he found a beautiful mountain top and landed. This place was filled with mountain springs and waterfalls, and in the morning mist, water splashed everywhere like ice coming out of a valley. It was full of spiritual energy. He sat on a big rock on the mountain top and did not move, quietly waiting for the green-clothed youth. Only when it was close to noon did they see a green and glossy streak of light tear through the air. Zhang Yan didn't get up. He just made a hand seal, and his whole body was lifted up by a wisp of wind. He stopped in front of the escaping light and said with a faint smile, "Fellow Taoist, you're late." The green-clothed youth's expression was a little ugly. He snorted and said, "I met a few annoying flies on the way." Zhang Yan didn't ask for details. He just smiled and said, "After so many battles, I still don't know how to address you." The green-clothed youngster puffed out his chest, clasped his hands behind his back, and said loudly, "You may not know my name even if I tell you. However, when I travel outside, I use the Taoist name Hibiko Higashi. So it's fellow Taoist Hibiko Higashi." Zhang Yan made a hand seal and 2 golden hammers flew out. He waved them in front of him and said, "Today, I'll have to experience fellow Taoist's skills again." Hibiko Higashi sneered and also made a green cloud appear on top of his head. This cloud was now more than 1,000 feet in size. It seemed to be twice as big as before. Green chi flew around, covering the clouds and covering the moon. There was also the sound of thunder. Countless green leaves floated in the air, and lightning bolts flew in and out. It looked even more imposing. He raised his hand and pointed, shaking the cloud. Countless black flowers and flying leaves flew out, bringing along a tidal wave of spiritual chi and surging down. Zhang Yan did not show any weakness. He said, "Come at me." Holding the twin hammers, he rushed forward and in a flash he was fighting with this person again. This time, no one interfered in their battle. Neither of them held back. Zhang Yan's punches and kicks were like falling thunder and rolling stones. Hibiko Higashi spread the green light 10 miles away. The clouds rolled and the fog rolled. The light and shadows were chaotic. It was a huge scene. 5 days later, Zhang Yan shouted and charged out of the green cloud. Hibiko Higashi also retracted the cloud and flew west. However, they couldn't decide the winner again. They went their separate ways. Zhang Yan rode the wind back to his cave. He sealed the cave door and meditated. He used his true fire to refine his acupoints again. This time, he went into seclusion for more than a month. When he woke up, he was happy to find that he had opened another 12 acupoints. This time, whether it was the time he spent cultivating or the amount of chi he absorbed, it was more than before. However, the number of acupoints he had opened was not as good as before. As his body absorbed more and more chi, the effect of the true fire was not as strong as before. However, this was already within Zhang Yan's expectations. Compared to other cultivators, his progress could be described as godly. The reason why ordinary cultivators couldn't open the 36 acupoints was because the acupoints were firmly guarded, and the true fire couldn't grow correspondingly stronger. But he was different. The true fire in his chi-si had already far surpassed his peers. If he fought with Hibiko Higashi a few more times, his true fire would grow stronger. According to his estimation, he would be able to burn all the acupoints in a year and a half. At most, it would take 3 to 4 years. At this time, in a valley of Mount Green Inch, the clansmen that Shi Yifan and Yan Yuo brought with them were quarreling. Pan Yang sat silently at the side. His eyes flickered as he looked at the people in front of him and sneered. Because Shi Yifan and Yan Yuo were in a hurry to fight for the Ganoderma ancestor's body, they didn't bring their servants and clansmen to prevent too many people from finding out. The group of people waited for 2 to 3 days, but they still didn't return. At that time, they knew something was wrong and sent people to search for them. In the end, they only found some torn clothes. Pan Yang's heart turned cold, but he wasn't willing to admit defeat. After planning with these people, they didn't care whether the Ganoderma ancestor's body was really in the hands of the green-robed young man. They spread the news that the green-robed young man was ruthless and overbearing. He killed anyone he saw and stole the medicinal Ganoderma from others. Initially, no one took his words seriously. But first, the corpses of the Wu clan's disciple and servant on 9 Peaks were discovered. Then, coincidentally, Hibiko Higashi was searching for medicinal Ganoderma in order to fight with Zhang Yan. He was confident in his profound cultivation base and strength, so he disdained to hide his tracks. Anyone he met would be killed by him. As a result, Pan Yang's words proved Pan Yang's words to be true. Therefore, some of the scattered cultivators joined forces to protect themselves, and there were even some who were indignant and went looking for Hibiko Higashi. Because the Zoisha ancestor's body was truly a one-of-a-kind spiritual treasure, it had also attracted the attention of some people, who wanted to snatch it away. Under the deliberate urging of the Shi and Yen clans, they took the initiative to stand out and gathered several hundred people to search for Dong Jinzi's traces. They even fought a few battles with him. That was why he was late to the battle with Zhang Yan that day. Originally, with these people working together, no matter how profound Hibiko Higashi's cultivation base was, his clone was only at the mystic light realm, so he could only retreat. However, because these people were not united and had their own motives, not only were they unable to do anything to him, many of their experts died. Therefore, the Shi and Yen clans had to sit down and come up with a new plan. In my opinion, the Ganoderma ancestor's body is definitely not in the green-robed young man's hands. It's with Li Yuanba. The person who spoke was a woman who looked to be in her 40s. She was the middle-aged woman who had been with Yen Yuyo that day. Opposite her was a young man who looked a little like Shi Yifan. It was his younger brother, Shi Yiming. His level of cultivation was not high, and he had only come to Mount Green Inch to broaden his horizons. Now that Shi Yifan was dead, he was in charge of the rest. When he heard what she said, he turned to her and said, "Aunt Yen, why do you say that?" Aunt Yen glanced at him and said, "Didn't 6th young master Shi see the two of them fight before?" Although it looks like the victor hasn't been decided yet, Li Yuanba is actually at a disadvantage every time. Shi Yiming was puzzled, so what? Aunt Yen snorted, "That green-robed young man looks like he wants to kill Li Yuanba no matter what. If the Ganoderma ancestor's body is really in his hands, why would he be like this? It's obvious that Li Yuanba stole his thing, that's why he's like this." This was a judgment she made based on her woman's intuition. Everyone present revealed contemplative expressions when they heard this. However, thinking about it carefully, it was just a guess. Who would know if it was true or not? Because of this, only a few people voiced their agreement. The middle-aged woman frowned. She turned her head and said, "Fellow Taoist Pan, what do you think?" Pan Yang's eyelids twitched. In truth, he also thought so. Come to think of it, he and Zhang Yan also had a grudge for killing a fellow disciple. However, the person who killed his eldest brother was that green-robed young man. He knew that he was no match for him alone, so he urged these people to kill this person first. If they didn't find the Ganoderma ancestor's body on this person, they would find trouble with Zhang Yan even without him driving them away. At that time, it would be killing 2 birds with 1 stone. But if they killed Zhang Yan first, who would go back to provoke that green-robed young man? He naturally couldn't say this out loud, so he immediately denied it. This one personally saw the Ganoderma ancestor's body being taken by that green-robed young man. This matter is absolutely true. As for whether or not it fell into Li Yuanba's hands, I have no idea. The middle-aged woman sneered and glared fiercely at Pan Yang. She stood up and said mockingly, "You also know how to lie with your eyes open. Do you think I don't know what you're thinking?" She looked around and sneered, "Since you are all unwilling, then I will bring my disciples to find Li Yuanba. There is no need for you to interfere." Shi Yiming also stood up and nodded, "In that case, Auntie Yen, you go find Li Yuanba. This young master will go find that green-robed young man. Our 2 families will not interfere, and no one else can touch the person who takes the Ganoderma ancestor's body." What do you think? Auntie Yen loudly said, I only want to avenge my wife. I don't care about the Ganoderma ancestor's body. Shi Yiming pointed at her and said with a faint smile, Auntie Yen, everyone here understands. There is no need for you to say such things that go against your heart. Farewell. With that, he turned his head and walked out. Behind him, one of his trusted aides hurriedly caught up and whispered in his ear, Sixth brother, I feel that Auntie Yan's words are reasonable. Why don't we go find Li Yuanba? Shi Yiming curled his lips and said, Do you think I really want to take the herb? The trusted aide was puzzled, Are you not? Shi Yiming chuckled and said, Wulang is dead, but he still has many followers in the clan. If I don't pretend to take the herb and avenge him, how can I win the hearts of these people over? This green-robed man is unfathomable. Even if I lose, no one will blame me. If I go find Li Yuanba and still lose, wouldn't it be self-defeating? He looked back and narrowed his eyes, that Auntie Yen is different from me. She is only a servant. If Yen Yu is dead, will she still be alive when she returns? It is better to choose Li Yuanba, who seems to be slightly weaker. If we are lucky enough to kill him, we can still explain ourselves to the clan. Target equals _blank. Chapter 248. Beyond the Mountains Taihao School, Purple Bamboo Mountain Training Hall. In Autumn Sense Pavilion, a kind-looking Taoist nun was playing chess with a scholarly Taoist with a high bun. After a while, the Taoist nun's expression changed. She flipped her finger and was about to make a move. Just as the piece was about to land, the scholarly Taoist laughed and waved his horsetail whisk, messing up the game. Junior sister Qin Yao is brilliant. Let's consider this a draw. The Taoist nun was not annoyed, but there was a hint of helplessness in her eyes. Senior brother always messes up the game. How can there be a winner? The scholarly Taoist didn't care, but there was a deeper meaning in his words. Those who play chess will always be trapped in the game. If junior sister can jump out of the game and open your arms, the world will be bright. The Taoist nun frowned. Senior brother still can't forget the Zoisha ancestor's body. The scholarly Taoist straightened his back and admitted frankly, of course. The Taoist nun sighed. The ancestor's rule states that Taihao School's disciples are not allowed to take the Zoisha ancestor. Senior brother, have you forgotten? The scholarly Taoist's eyes flickered. But if someone else takes it and I take it, then it won't be against the school's rules. The Taoist nun shook her head and said in a low voice, then senior brother deliberately let the demon in. He always has an ulterior motive. The scholarly Taoist laughed. Junior sister, you must be joking. I didn't invite him here. He walked into the trap. What does that have to do with me? The Taoist nun sighed. The demon's heavenly tribulation is coming. If he doesn't come to take the body, he most likely won't be able to avoid it. How can senior brother not know? The scholarly Taoist chuckled. I have no other choice. Now that the 10 sects all have outstanding disciples, Taihao School can't have any descendants. We can only do our best to nurture them. Only then can we show our edge in the sword competition of the 16 sections. My disciple is a rare genius. How can I hold him back? I have to give him the best medicine. The Taoist nun nodded slowly and said, Senior brother, you've put in a lot of effort for this disciple. The elegant Taoist stood up and bowed to the Taoist nun. However, I'm afraid that the old demon knows my intentions. After he leaves the mountain, his other avatars will come to support him. I don't have the confidence to defeat his 2 Yuanying avatars by yourself. Please help me, junior martial sister. The Taoist nun hurriedly stood up and supported the scholarly Taoist, saying, Senior brother, how can you do this? However, even after persuading him for a long time, the Taoist still refused to get up. The Taoist nun knew that this senior martial brother of hers had always been thick-skinned and ruthless, so she couldn't do anything to him. She could only sigh helplessly and say, Forget it, forget it. He's a demon anyway, so it's fine to get rid of him. However, Junior Martial Sister has one condition. When the elegant Taoist heard her reply, he was overjoyed and hurriedly said, Shimi, please speak. The Taoist nun said seriously, if the Zoisha ancestor's body is in someone else's possession, I won't interfere. The elegant Taoist thought to himself, although this demon entered the mountain as a mystic light avatar, he's still quite powerful. Besides, no one knows where the Zoisha ancestor's body is buried except for him. However, I have my own preparations. Whoever has the Zoisha ancestor's body will be able to identify it. If it's really not this old demon, then I don't need Junior Martial Sister's help. When he thought of this, he straightened his body and said, fine. If it's in someone else's hands, Junior Martial Sister can just sit back and do nothing. The Taoist nun glanced at him and shook her head. She knew that if the Zoisha ancestor's body was really in someone else's hands, this thick-skinned and black-hearted senior martial brother of hers would also find an excuse to forcefully take it from him. Although she disliked this kind of behavior, she had no intention of stopping him. At this time, in Mount Green Inch, after the Yen and Shur clans had come to an agreement, they parted ways. The rogue cultivators around them also dispersed. The Su brothers followed the crowd out of the valley and left on a cloud. Halfway there, Su Yanfu suddenly said, Brother, we can't let the Yen clansman cause trouble for fellow Taoist Li. We need to warn him so he can be prepared. Su Yangquang nodded in agreement. Second brother is right. That fellow Taoist Li saved our lives. We must repay this kindness. Even if we offend the Yen clan, we can't go against our principles. Su Yanfu smiled and said, Big brother, if the Yen clansman and fellow Taoist Li fight, who do you think will win? Su Yangquang thought about it and said, that green-clothed man can come and go without anyone stopping him, but fellow Taoist Li can fight evenly with him. Among the Yen clansmen, only Auntie Yen has some cultivation, the rest are just there to make up the numbers. How can they win? Su Yanfu said in a relaxed manner, that's right. Now that Yen Yuyo is dead, the remaining Yen clansmen are all anxious. If they go back, they will die eventually. They might want to fight fellow Taoist Li with their lives. If we send him a favor, it won't cost us anything. Su Yangquang suddenly frowned and said, but we don't know where fellow Taoist Li lives, how can we find him? Su Yanfu said, I was thinking about this just now. Why don't we go to the place where fellow Taoist Li wanted to meet last time? If we really can't find him, we'll decide what to do next. Su Yangquang nodded and said, all right, let's go there first. The two of them felt that this matter shouldn't be delayed, but they were very cautious. They first circled around and made sure that no one was following them before heading to Nine Peaks. Zhang Yan's cave was located at the peak of the mountain, so it was very easy to find. Not long after, they arrived. Su Yangquang saw that the cave's door was sealed with a large stone, but there wasn't much dust or filth on the stone. It was obvious that someone had moved it not long ago. He was delighted and said loudly, is fellow Taoist Li here? I am Su Yangquang and my younger brother Yanfu. I have something important to tell you. Zhang Yan was training his true light in the cave. When he heard these two people's names, he thought for a moment and waved his hand to open the stone that sealed the door. He said, please come in and have a chat. The Su brothers entered the cave. After greeting Zhang Yan, they didn't delay and told him their purpose of coming. Zhang Yan didn't expect that the Yen clansman would target him. Although he didn't take it to heart, the Su brothers had good intentions, so he smiled and said, I have to thank the two of you for coming to tell me. Su Yangquang said, no problem. Zhang Yan nodded slightly and took out 2 medicinal mushrooms from his sleeve. With a point of his finger, the 2 mushrooms floated into the hands of the 2 people and said, this is what I obtained during this trip. Please take it. Su Yanfu's eyes revealed joy. This medicinal mushroom was obviously the best of the best. If he obtained it, even if he didn't use it to condense his own core, he could still exchange it for a few good treasures. Thus, he looked at his brother. However, Su Yangquang shook his head and refused. We brothers came here to repay a favor. How can we accept fellow Taoist's gift? Zhang Yan could tell that these words came from his heart. He smiled lightly and said, that was a small matter. It's not worth mentioning. Since you risked your life to come and tell me, how can I be stingy with these things? Su Yanfu also desperately looked over and said, brother, fellow Taoist Li has good intentions. Why don't we accept it? Su Yanghuang hesitated for a moment. In the end, he clenched his teeth and said, fine. Then we brothers will accept it. If fellow Taoist is free in the future, please come to Fire Wave Mountain Su Jialing. We will definitely treat you well. Seeing that the two of them accepted the medicinal mushrooms, Zhang Yan asked them a few more questions. They were all about the movements of the many cultivators in Mount Qing Cun. The Su brothers naturally told him everything they knew. Not long after, the Su brothers saw that Zhang Yan seemed to have the intention to send them away, so they stood up and bade farewell. After the two of them left, Zhang Yan sat silently for a moment. Then, he smiled coldly and stepped out of the cave. He leaped into the clouds and flew towards the north. His eyes flickered with a hint of killing intent. Even though the Yen disciples were only small fries, since they wanted to deal with him, how could they just sit here and wait for others to kill them? Naturally, he would kill them first. The Yen disciples were all gathered on Pear Blossom Peak. After Aunt Yen decided to make a move on Zhang Yan, she sent her servants everywhere to persuade others to join her, while secretly waiting for the right time. She believed that since the green-clothed man and Zhang Yan had yet to determine a winner, there would be a battle sooner or later. That would be the best opportunity to attack Zhang Yan. If she could really find the Zoisha ancestor on him, then she would be able to explain herself when she returned to the clan. At this time, a golden light fell from the sky and into the cave. A servant girl caught it and carefully handed it to her. Aunt Yen opened it and couldn't help but reveal a happy expression. She thought to herself, after giving out 2 medicinal mushrooms, the Xiang clan finally agreed. If we add on the clans that agreed earlier, I will have nearly 100 people to help me. At that time, I won't have to fear that Li Yuanba. If we can work together, we will definitely be able to kill him in one fell swoop. Just as she was feeling happy, she heard a thunderous roar in the sky. Yen disciples, come out and accept your death. Aunt Yen was startled and quickly rushed out of the cave. When she looked up, her body trembled and she cried out involuntarily, Li Yuanba. The Yen disciples also recognized him. They didn't expect him to come looking for them. Immediately, they panicked and took out their flying swords. For a moment, light and shadow became chaotic. Aunt Yen had seen the battle between Zhang Yan and the green-clothed man. She knew that the people in front of her were definitely not this person's opponent. Her eyes turned, but she didn't say a word and turned around to escape. Zhang Yan's gaze swept down and saw that among the dozens of people, there was no one with a higher cultivation than him. He didn't move and only let out a cold shout. In an instant, a curtain of water rose behind him and a watercolored light swept across the valley. With a flash, everyone present and their weapons disappeared. Aunt Yen had just started to fly away when she suddenly felt a pulling force on her body. Before she could struggle, she felt the world spin around her and the scenery in front of her changed. She looked up and couldn't help but be shocked. She saw white waves surging in the sky and rivers surging. She didn't know how many streams of water were like jade dragons and silver ribbons. Above, below, left and right, there was a vast expanse of mist. It was as if she had fallen into the boundless Milky Way. Zhang Yan did not retract his mysterious technique. Instead, he released the mysterious yellow big hand above his head. Then, he shook his true light, and a man fell out of the water curtain. Zhang Yan urged his technique, and the mysterious yellow big hand fell down in an incomparably barbaric manner, and slapped the man to death. Next, he repeated the same method and slapped the person to death as soon as he pulled them out. Aunt Yan's cultivation was the highest, but she was the last to be released. However, she was a lot stronger than the others. When she came out, her mind was still clear. When she saw the mysterious yellow hand coming down, she was shocked and desperately released her Xian light to block it. However, under the mysterious yellow hand, it was like a mantis trying to stop a chariot. Immediately, the Xian light shattered and blood wildly sprayed out. The mysterious yellow hand continued to fall without pause. With a bang, smoke and dust flew everywhere. She was also crushed into a pile of minced meat. In just a moment, Zhang Yan had killed all the disciples of the Yan clan in this valley. He lowered his aura and put away the heaven and earth great hand and water element true light. Then, he soared into the sky and circled around Pear Blossom Peak. After making sure that no one was left out, he rode a gust of wind and went back the way he came. Target =_blank. Chapter 249. 10BB10DD10GG10LL10MM10WW10QQ10SS10 date 06-09-06- For more interesting novels, please go to chapter 110. Working together, then both will benefit. Green clouds covered the sky, as if they were smoke. Hibiko Higashi's green robes fluttered in the wind as he stood under the bright moon. He raised his fingers and formed a hand seal, continuously sending out green rainbow-like flying lights that attacked the dozens of cultivators below him. These dozens of cultivators gathered in one place, working together to resist the enemy. Although they were facing a tidal wave of attacks, they didn't panic at all. There were 3 transcendent artifacts hovering above everyone's heads: a pot, a staff, and a candle. All of them emitted a bright glow, faintly protecting the entire mountain peak that everyone was standing on. Even with the rolling green chi and the flying leaves that were like blades, they still couldn't break through this layer of barrier. Meanwhile, there were 3 Taoists flying in the sky, moving back and forth. Above their heads were 3 long swords that emitted magnificent rainbow-like lights. The swords danced in the air, faintly aiming at Hibiko Higashi. Often, if he was slightly distracted, the swords would come to kill him. Hibiko Higashi attacked a few more times, but seeing that he couldn't break through this formation, he felt impatient and went to find the 3 Taoists who were holding the swords to kill him. However, every time he did this, the 3 Taoists would lead him in a circle, and just when he was about to be caught, they would fall into the formation. When he left, they would come out of the formation again. After going back and forth a few times, Hibiko Higashi was also extremely annoyed. Now that almost all of the medicinal mushrooms in the shallow soil had been dug out by him, these medicinal mushrooms seemed to feel that a great disaster was imminent, and all of them burrowed deep into the ground. In this way, even he wouldn't be able to dig them out in a short period of time. Therefore, he turned his attention to those cultivators, but he didn't expect that these people would use the flag formation to fight against him, leaving him with nowhere to start. Hibiko Higashi knew that it was pointless to continue fighting, so he grunted heavily and left while gazing into the sky. Seeing him disappear, the 3 Taoists heaved a long sigh of relief. Although it had only been a short moment, the pressure they had faced was unprecedentedly great. If Hibiko Higashi had continued to stay, it would not have been long before the Yuanjin in their bodies were completely exhausted. Their leader came to the center of the formation and bowed to Shi Yiming, who was standing in front of him. Shi Clan's 6th brother's plan is truly brilliant. The 3 of us will form a corner with the formation. As expected, this green-robed freak won't be able to break through us. Shi Yiming immediately cupped his hands in greeting and said modestly, "There was a flaw in this method. It was all thanks to the help of all of you that I was able to pass." The leading Taoist sighed and said, "Lu Lang is too modest. If you hadn't come up with this method to deal with this devil, we would have entered the treasure mountain empty-handed." Everyone at the side nodded in agreement. Over the past few days, Shi Yiming had gathered a few trustworthy people and set up more than 10 formation flags around Qianren Peak. He also ordered a few people with profound cultivation to search for medicinal mushrooms. If Hibiko Higashi came to rob them, they could fight and retreat at the same time. Then, they would hide in the nearest formation flag and call for reinforcements. When the others arrived, they would attack together and force him to retreat. After a few times, other cultivators also followed suit. If Hibiko Higashi came, they would hide in the formation and not come out. If he retreated, they would come out to dig for medicinal mushrooms. After Hibiko Higashi flew away, he soon landed on a mountain peak. His face was gloomy and he was secretly annoyed. If it wasn't for the fact that this body couldn't withstand his Xian Qi, which prevented him from using many of his methods, how could he not be able to deal with this group of juniors? That day, he fought with Zhang Yan for 5 consecutive days, but he had swallowed no less than 70 medicinal mushrooms to nourish his body. It could be seen how poor the foundation of his body was. But now, he only had a dozen medicinal mushrooms in his hands. In a few days, it would be the day of the battle with Zhang Yan again. This made him not have the slightest confidence that he could win. He stood on the mountain peak with his hands behind his back and couldn't help but frown. After failing to defeat Zhang Yan twice in a row, he knew that if he still used his original method, even if he fought a few more times, he still wouldn't be able to defeat this person. After standing in the same place and thinking for a while, he couldn't help but think that Li Yuanba is very tough and his body is strong. Even if I can win, it will be a Pyrrhic victory. I may not be able to take back that body. Fighting again is useless. It seems that I have to have a good talk with this person. After making up his mind, he didn't go anywhere else. He just sat on the mountain peak and watched the sun rise and the moon set, the tide rise and fall. 5 days passed in a flash. Seeing that the time had come, he flew into the sky, riding the clouds and the wind, heading towards the agreed place. This time, he was the first to arrive. In less than an hour, he saw Zhang Yan coming from afar. Without waiting for Zhang Yan to approach, Hibiko Higashi straightened his clothes and took the initiative to greet him. "Fellow Taoist Li, please wait a moment. I have something to discuss with you." Seeing his sudden change in attitude, Zhang Yan felt a little strange in his heart. His eyes flashed and he stood in the air, smiling. "Fellow Taoist Hibiko Higashi, if you have something to say, feel free to say it." Hibiko Higashi glanced around and said, "This is not the place to talk. Fellow Taoist Li, please come with me." Zhang Yan readily agreed, "Sure." Seeing him agree so readily, Hibiko Higashi couldn't help glancing at him, nodding and taking the lead. After traveling for 2 hours, he found a valley where no one could be seen and descended. The valley was quiet and tranquil, with a gurgling stream. The walls were filled with beautiful flowers and grass, and birds chirping in the forest. It could be considered a beautiful scenery. Seeing 2 large rocks facing each other in the valley, Hibiko Higashi landed on one of them. Zhang Yan also landed on the rock opposite him. Hibiko Higashi placed his hand on his knee and looked at Zhang Yan. Seeing that the latter had sat down, he didn't beat around the bush and went straight to the point. "Fellow Taoist Li, the reason I came to find you today is for the Zoisha ancestor's shell. This thing is extremely important to me. If you're willing to give it to me, I'll definitely not let you suffer a loss." Zhang Yan smiled and shook his head. "This thing is of great use to me. There's no reason for me to give it to you." Seeing how resolute Zhang Yan's refusal was, Hibiko Higashi didn't get angry. He considered his words for a while and said, "Fellow Taoist Li, I've told you before that even if you obtain this thing, you won't be able to bring it out of the mountain. Do you know why?" When he heard this, Zhang Yan only treated it as a threat and didn't take it to heart. Now that Hibiko Higashi mentioned it again, he could tell that there was more to it than meets the eye. He raised his gaze to look at the other party and said, "Please enlighten me, fellow Taoist." Hibiko Higashi patted his knee and said in a deep voice, "I won't hide it from you. I'm a cultivator from the Devil's Sect. What you're seeing now is only one of my avatars. It's only because there's a tribulation I need to avoid, and this Zoisha ancestor's shell is the only thing that can help me escape. That's why I came to this mountain. However, I also know that there's someone in this Taihao school who's been coveting this thing for a long time. It's just that they couldn't take it out due to the rules set by the patriarch. This person allowed me to enter the mountain so easily this time. I'm afraid he's planning to use me to take this thing out and then snatch it from me. Think about it, if this person found out that this thing is in your hands, do you think he would let you escape so easily? So that's the reason. Zhang Yan laughed heartily and said, that's right. If I were in his shoes, I definitely wouldn't let him go. Hibiko Higashi waved his sleeve and nodded. That's right. This person's cultivation has long since reached the Yuanying realm. If he has the help of someone from the same sect, then even if I take this Zoisha ancestor's shell and leave, I'll have to slaughter a path of blood to escape. If it was you, then you absolutely wouldn't have this chance. When he spoke up to hear, Hibiko Higashi carefully observed Zhang Yan's expression. He saw that Zhang Yan was calm and composed, and there wasn't the slightest trace of panic on his face. It seemed like Zhang Yan wasn't moved by this news at all. Hibiko Higashi's eyes couldn't help but narrow as he thought to himself, could it be that this Li Yuanba has another way to escape? He originally thought that once he said these words, Zhang Yan would definitely ask for advice on how to deal with this problem. However, after waiting for a long time, Zhang Yan only smiled and said nothing, and he couldn't help but feel slightly impatient in his heart. After waiting for another long time, he was truly unable to restrain himself and said, I have a method that satisfies both sides. It just depends on whether fellow Daoist is willing or not. Zhang Yan neither agreed nor disagreed, and he only smiled as he said, fellow Daoist, please tell me about it. Hibiko Higashi said loudly, the reason you took the Zoisha ancestor's shell is no other than for the sake of condensing your core. I can temporarily leave this thing in your hands, and it can even help you leave safely. However, after you form your core, you must return this thing to me. However, you must swear an oath in front of me. In this way, after you leave the mountain, I can only be at ease and let you leave. Zhang Yan was slightly taken aback. He never expected that Hibiko Higashi would say something like this. After thinking about it carefully, he couldn't help but nod to himself. This was a way to compromise as well. The reason why the solitary chi zoisha was one of the external ingredients for condensing a core was because it was able to gather the purest strand of chi in the world. However, after he formed his core, this thing would no longer be of any use to him, so agreeing to this condition wasn't out of the question. Seeing that he didn't answer for a long time, Hibiko Higashi couldn't help but remind him again, fellow Daoist, the Taihao school naturally has a way to identify who possesses the Zoisha ancestor's shell. You must think carefully. Zhang Yan was naturally able to read the meaning behind Hibiko Higashi's words. The reason this person was willing to help him was most likely because he was afraid that the Taihao school would snatch the Zoisha ancestor's shell from him. In that case, it would probably be even more impossible for him to obtain this thing. He carefully analyzed the pros and cons, and discovered that if he and Hibiko Higashi worked together, they would both benefit, and if they split up, they would both suffer losses. Moreover, Hibiko Higashi had clearly said that this thing was something he could use to avoid calamity. At this point, if he didn't agree, then this person would probably disregard everything to kill him after he left the mountain. He pondered for a moment, then nodded and said, fellow Daoist's words aren't without reason. Hibiko Higashi was overjoyed, and he said, if you agree, then swear an oath. However, Zhang Yan raised his hand and waved it off, saying with a smile, hold on. If you want me to agree, then I'll need you to promise me two things. Hibiko Higashi was startled when he heard that. Then, a cold gleam shot out from his eyes, and he said coldly, fellow Daoist, don't push your luck. Zhang Yan smiled faintly, and said, you're the one who begged me for this matter, so I'm very indifferent to it. Hibiko Higashi felt a wave of suffocation in his heart. The corner of his lips twitched, and he flung his sleeves and shouted, fine, tell me about it. From his point of view, this shell was related to the important matter of him avoiding calamity, so everything else could be cast aside. Even if the other party came up with some outrageous conditions, as long as it didn't affect his foundation, he could temporarily tolerate it. Zhang Yan said unhurriedly, I see that fellow Daoist is proficient in wood elemental mystic arts, so you should have the chi of the first and second wood essence in your body. Can you share some with me? Hibiko Higashi only frowned slightly, then he nodded and said, "This is not a difficult matter, I'll agree to it." "What about the other request?" Zhang Yan smiled, and said, "I sense that the mystic light on fellow Taoist's body is strange, and it has the effect of refining my body. I hope fellow Taoist will not be stingy in helping me." Chapter 250. Technique Unsealing the Art of Teleportation. Zhang Yan let out a long breath, and the sound of wind whistling sounded in the cave. He inspected his body and checked the acupuncture points that he had already opened. It had been 3 months since he last met Hibiko Higashi. Zhang Yan was using the otherworldly aura to strengthen his true fire. Originally, he could only absorb it carefully, afraid that Hibiko Higashi would see through him. However, after he made things clear, he didn't have to worry anymore. One was taking it openly, and the other was taking it secretly. The two couldn't be mentioned in the same breath. After receiving Hibiko Higashi's help, the true fire in his body became stronger in a short amount of time. During these past few days, he'd been painstakingly cultivating in the abode, and he'd successively opened 6 more apertures. Coupled with the 2 previous times, he'd burned through a total of 34 apertures, and he was only 2 away from the mastery realm. However, Zhang Yan stopped at this point. It wasn't that he couldn't continue or that he had met an obstacle, it was because he was being careful. Previously, when he activated his major acupoints, it was like a hot knife through butter. He had once opened 3 acupoints in one day. However, after that, it took him a long time to open each acupuncture point. After working hard for close to 100 days, he had only opened 3. Furthermore, he couldn't rest for even a moment when he circulated his cultivation technique, otherwise all his previous efforts would go to waste. After using the jade fragment to try a few times, he found that it would take a year to refine the 35th acupuncture point. The last one, which was the 36th acupuncture point, was the most important and would take a long time. If there was even the slightest mistake, his Tao foundation might be damaged. It could be said to be extremely dangerous. Zhang Yan thought to himself, no wonder even the core disciples of the big sects can't do anything at this point. With the help of the strange aura, I still need more than a month to open each acupuncture point. If it was someone else, it would take more than a dozen years or even dozens of years. For cultivators at the Mystic Light realm, who has the ability to do this without outside help? Asking a cultivator above the Mystic Light realm to spend dozens of years to help someone open their apertures. Aside from the direct disciples of the Xian families, no one else would be able to do so. Zhang Yan sighed with emotion for a long time. Then, he pondered for a while. There were still more than 2 years before the formation would be activated. This Mount Qingzuan was ultimately a place of trouble. No one could predict what would happen. It would be better to wait until after the formation was activated and then find a place to cultivate. Although his progress was slightly slower, it was much more stable than forcefully breaking through here. Thinking up to this point, he decided not to continue. He lightly breathed through his nose and mouth a few times, retracting the true fire, turning it into a lively flame and burying it in his qi si. After putting this matter down, he thought about another matter that was related to his own strength. According to Hibiko Higashi, the person from the Taihao school who came to steal the Reisher ancestor's body was also a Yuanian cultivator. His cultivation shouldn't be below Hibiko Higashi's. Zhang Yan was worried about another aspect. This Mount Qingzuan was the Taihao school's territory. If that was the case, he might have to face more than one Yuanian cultivator. At that time, if Hibiko Higashi couldn't even protect himself, why would he care about him? Zhang Yan thought to himself, although this Hibiko Higashi promised to help me get out of the Great Void Defense Formation and even made an oath, I'm still borrowing the power of others. If something happens, I won't have any way out. He thought about everything he had learned and thought about how he could escape when the time came. Among the techniques he practiced, the sword escape was the fastest. However, first, he might not be able to escape from the Yuanian cultivator. Second, he could easily expose his identity. Even if the Taihao school didn't dare to do anything to him, it wouldn't be difficult to capture him and lock him up for a dozen years. If he used the fake body from the Carefree manual to escape, he definitely wouldn't be able to fool the Yuanian cultivators who had great eyesight and profound cultivation. He pondered for a long time, and in the end, he thought of the technique Qin Mabai bestowed upon him. It seemed to be a technique to escape as well. However, when he examined it a few times earlier, all he saw was a blurry talisman that he was unable to see through clearly, so he was naturally unable to comprehend any profound technique from it. He didn't have much hope at first, but when he thought about it, the space between his eyebrows twitched. He didn't know what happened, but the true fire in his sea of qi surged up without being triggered by his divine sense. He heard a boom, and the fire burned the golden talisman. With this, the place that was normally shrouded in clouds and mist seemed to have suddenly opened some kind of door. The talisman suddenly flowed down like melting ice. His body trembled slightly, and a technique flashed past his eyes like a flickering light. It turned into countless golden fragments and directly imprinted into his mind. He couldn't help but be shocked. He read it carefully and couldn't help but say happily, "So this is the technique. In this case, I have nothing to worry about." This technique was called the lesser shifting escape technique. He had seen this technique before. That day, Qi Yuntian brought him out of the devil's cave. In just a breath, they were able to return to the guardian island from the devil's cave. Zhang Yan secretly thought that the reason why he couldn't see through this technique before was because he hadn't cultivated the true fire in his aperture to a suitable level. Therefore, no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't touch the technique. But now that his cultivation had reached a certain level, there was no hindrance and he could naturally see through this technique. Thinking of this, he was alarmed. The Qinsang school was really strict in selecting disciples. Even if sect leader Qin obviously admired him, he wouldn't help him for nothing. Just like what was happening now, if he didn't open a certain number of apertures, he probably wouldn't be able to learn this little technique. When he returned to the mountain gate, the sect leader would only need to make a gesture to know if he was worthy of being nurtured. If he couldn't even open this talisman, the sect leader would give up without hesitation and wouldn't even look at him again. On the path of cultivation, the higher one went, the harder it was to go. It was already rare for a Yuanian cultivator to come out of the unorthodox path. Even if one had a lifespan of 1,000 years, without the true teachings and opportunities, he wouldn't be able to achieve the great Tao. After all, he was just a pile of bones under the yellow mud. There were 10 top disciples in the Qinsang school. If there were no accidents, the ones who would achieve great things in the future would be among these 10 people. These 10 people could receive constant advice from their masters and seniors, could learn the best cultivation techniques, could obtain external objects that were hard to find in this world, and could be bestowed with good magical treasures to protect themselves. These 10 people were the foundation of the Yingzang sect in the future. Moreover, they did not appear out of thin air. Not to mention Qi Yuntian, even people like Zhuang Bufan and Luo Qingyu had made a name for themselves during the sword competition of the 16 sects. They had also defeated many of their peers within the sects, which was why they could firmly occupy their positions. Compared to them, the ordinary true disciples were like heaven and earth. Zhang Yan secretly made up his mind that after he condensed his Dan, he must fight for the position of the top 10 disciples. After pondering for a moment, he gathered his thoughts and focused his attention on the lesser warp escape technique in his mind. This technique was a little technique. Once it was used, it could teleport 100 days away in a flash. But all those who used this technique needed to use mana to control it. It couldn't be used before reaching the core transformation realm. Fortunately, sect leader Qin had left a strand of essence in this talisman. With the help of this strand of essence, he didn't need to waste time practicing and could temporarily use this technique. Zhang Yan held the broken jade and carefully studied it. He found that the essence was not much, but it was not little either. It could be used about 3 to 4 times. If he encountered a normal situation, it would be enough. But when facing a Yuanian cultivator, he didn't dare to be careless. He smiled slightly. Fortunately, he still had a golden core given by Tao Jinren in his stomach. With this technique, even if Hibiko Higashi couldn't take care of him at a critical moment, he could use the golden core's chi to teleport 1,000 miles away in an instant. After these thoughts were settled, his worries were all gone. Unconsciously, he calmed down. Sitting on the stone platform, he thought for a while and took out the Taoist book that Elder Yen gave him. He carefully read it and thought to himself, of the 9 medicines needed to condense the Dan, except for the first 3, which are hard to find and rely on the cultivator's own senses. Among them, the hardest to find are the bright stone milk, the 1-breath Ganoderma, and the 4 Marquises water. Now that these 3 are in my hands, and the other 3 are easy to find, I think the day of condensing the Dan is not far away. Among the 3 medicines in his hands, the bright stone milk and the 1-breath Ganoderma were external medicines, and the 4 Marquises water was internal medicine. Ning Chongxian had traveled the world for 20 years, and most of his time was spent searching for these 3 medicines. It was not easy to collect the bright stone milk. It could only be produced in deep caves. Even if it was found, it was only 1 or 2 drops. It required a cultivator to travel around for several years to collect it. The bottle of bright stone milk in Zhang Yan's hands was used by Mu Hongqin's master for many years, and it was just now. As for the 4 Marquises water, it was produced in places where the qi of heaven and earth was stagnant. It usually took more than 10 years to produce it. It was the most difficult medicine to find among the 3 internal medicines. That was why Xiao Han, a direct disciple of the Xiao clan, had to travel to the outer endless sea to find this water. As for the 1-breath Ganoderma, it was the best in Mount Green Inch. If one was not a disciple of a famous sect, even if he obtained it, it would only be of inferior quality. It was better to search outside the mountain. Now that the Ganoderma ancestor that Zhang Yan had obtained was used to condense the Dan, no other medicinal Ganoderma in the world could surpass it. The 3 medicines he still lacked were the cleansing spirit cave, the Chua thunder, and the body refining marrow. When a cultivator was condensing the Dan, he needed to enter the cleansing spirit cave to combine the medicines and absorb the new. This cave could be found almost everywhere in the East Flower continent, and it was very easy to find. The Taoist book that Elder Yen had given him recorded many rare caves. When it came time to condense the Dan, he only needed to pick one. As for the Chua thunder, he needed to first create a golden plate and go to the North Flower continent's God-crossing peak to attract a wisp of lightning. After obtaining the lightning, the cultivator could not miss the opportunity and had to condense the Dan within half a month. Otherwise, he would have to start all over again. As for the body refining marrow, it came from the body of a bird. Every summer, dozens of different species of birds would come to God-crossing peak to rest. The marrow hidden in the bird's spine was the accumulation of its body's essence. If he could capture it alive on the day of the Chua thunder and extract the marrow from its bones, the 2 medicines would be compatible. To Zhang Yan, these 2 things were not difficult to obtain. It was just that he would have to spend a few more days on the God-crossing peak. However, he could also imagine that at that time, there might be people like the Ho clan waiting there, deliberately taking advantage of this opportunity to cause trouble for him. He coldly smiled. On the path of the Great Tao, there was no right or wrong. If someone came to obstruct him, he would simply use his sword to break through the enemy and kill his way out. Target =_blank. Chapter 251. On the 9-headed peak, Zhang Yan sat cross-legged on the stone platform. Behind him, there was a ball of yellowish mist floating high above his head. It was moving slowly and changing its shape. Advertisement of download the mist was thick and heavy. It was like a collapsing cloud, a giant rock, or a collapsing mountain. It was eerie. Zhang Yan circulated the light mist a few times. With a gesture, he absorbed the mist back into his body. He then kept his spiritual vigor and raised his head. In the blink of an eye, 2 years had passed. Due to various concerns, he did not burn his apertures or refine his acupoints. Instead, he focused all his attention on cultivating the mysterious true light. Water was the source of the 5 elements, and earth was the mother of the 5 elements. Without earth, nothing would grow. He had already achieved a small success in the water element true light. It was impossible for him to improve it in a short period of time. Therefore, he chose to cultivate the earth element true light. Even with the help of the broken jade, he could only condense a ball of true light in the past 2 years. He was still far away from releasing it to hurt people. He pinched his fingers and calculated. In a few more hours, it would be the time for Mount Qing Cun to open the formation. It was about time to move. He laughed and said, "The formation door is about to open, why hasn't Tong Air returned yet?" On a stone platform the size of a wheel outside the cave, there was a child playing with a bright feathered chickadee. Upon hearing the greeting, the child responded crisply. He arched his small body and turned into a stream of clear air, entering his sleeve. Zhang Yan smiled. Mr. Shi had already passed away a year ago. Since he had promised to bring this Shi Tong to the mortal world to have fun, he naturally would not go back on his previous promise. Today was the day he should bring him out of the formation. He got up and walked out of the cave. Standing on the cliff, he looked into the distance. Suddenly, the sky was illuminated by the green air. It dyed the clouds green. Leaves fell and a green cloud flew over. A voice rang out in midair, "Fellow Taoist Li, are you ready to go today?" Zhang Yan tapped the ground with the tip of his foot and flew up to the cloud along with the wind. He stopped not far from Hibiko Higashi. He smiled and said, "Since I have an agreement with fellow Taoist Dong Jin, I will naturally comply. Don't worry, I will look for an opportunity to escape after I get out of the formation." Hibiko Higashi said coldly, "That's good. The Ganoderma ancestor's body must not be lost. Just watch how I deal with it later. I should be able to open a path for you." Zhang Yan nodded slightly. They had already reached an agreement on this matter. After a few more words, they each sat on the clouds and waited for the formation to open. At this moment, outside the formation door, the refined Taoist and the Taoist nun Qingyao had arrived. They were cupping their hands in greeting and congratulating each other. The two of them were surrounded by clear energy, causing fragrant flowers and strange birds to circle around them. Pop-up/notification beneath their feet was a gourd leaf. It was green and tender, swaying with the wind. Suddenly, a ray of light appeared beside them. A cough came from within. The two of them looked to the side and saw a white-bearded Taoist who was less than 3 feet tall. This person was sitting on a banana leaf. He was skinny and had a wrinkled face. He held a bamboo stick in his hand and a purple-red gourd hung on it. His eyelids were drooping. He looked like he was half awake. It was Han Guzi, who Zhang Yan met once in Purple Bamboo Mountain. The refined Taoist asked in surprise, "Junior apprentice brother, where did you come from?" His junior apprentice brother's Yuanying had already been broken by Qi and Tian. He was holding onto a piece of pill jade and was struggling at death's door. He didn't expect him to come here today. He didn't know what method he used to get out of the mountain. Han Guzi said with a hoarse voice, "Senior apprentice brother, thank you for asking. I came here today because I have a knot in my heart that hasn't been resolved." The refined Taoist nodded and didn't ask anymore. This junior apprentice brother of his had a strange temper after his foundation was broken. He wasn't easy to get close to. It was only because they were from the same sect that he couldn't not greet him. Han Guzi stared at the formation door. That day, he asked Yu Hongzhang to test Zhang Yan's background. However, Yu Hongzhang acted respectfully on the surface, but in reality, he didn't care about him at all. Ever since his foundation was broken, his temperament changed greatly. He became more sensitive. Even when the disciples in the sect whispered to each other, they would suspect that they were secretly mocking him. Now that he was treated like this by a junior, he was even more embarrassed and angry. However, he also knew that he wasn't as good as he used to be. The Yu clan wasn't something he could provoke. He was full of resentment and anger, but it involved Zhang Yan. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that Zhang Yan's background was strange. He swore in his heart that he would capture this person and ask him about it. That was why he came here on the day the formation opened. He also wanted to show others that he wasn't a useless person who could only hide in the mountain. On the other side, Taoist priestess Qing Yao and the refined Taoist were talking and laughing. She looked at the young cultivator behind the refined Taoist. She saw that he was handsome, his eyes were like dots of paint, and his hair was tied up in a long robe. He looked very dignified. She said, "Senior apprentice brother Hao, is this your disciple?" Taoist Hao smiled and said, "Yes." He then scolded, "Jinglan, come and greet Uncle Master." The young cultivator was also very respectful. He bowed to Taoist priestess Qing Yao and said, "Nephew Hua Jinglan greets Uncle Master." Taoist priestess Qing Yao nodded with a smile and said, "No need to be so polite." Han Guzi looked from afar and saw that Taoist he had no intention of asking Hua Jinglan to greet him. It was as if Taoist he didn't care about him at all. Taoist he's face became even more gloomy. On a mountain several miles away, Ho Baksu stood in the distance with a few disciples of the Ho clan. He looked at the mountain range that was buried in the thick clouds and unconsciously furrowed his brows. For some reason, Ho Baksu felt a little uneasy. However, when he thought of Ho Sanlang having the help of the 5 Spirits White Carp shuttle, he felt that he was thinking too much. After an unknown amount of time, the misty smoke in the distant mountains reverberated and swayed like waves. The thin fog that had shrouded Mount Qing Cun for the past 3 years finally drifted away. As soon as the formation opened, a talisman flew out before anyone could be seen. Taoist He's expression brightened and he reached out to receive it. Because the Great Void Defense Formation was closed, he didn't know the situation in Mount Qing Cun. In order to prevent Hibiko Higashi from causing any trouble, he had arranged for a few disciples to enter the formation. This flying talisman was sent by one of them. When he opened the flying talisman, he frowned and thought to himself, how could there be such a change? Who is this Li Yuanba? Who has the Zoisha ancestor's body? After thinking for a while, he handed the flying talisman to a servant boy beside him and said, "Go take care of the disciples guarding the formation. When the people in the formation come out, if they see anyone who looks the same as the one in this talisman, try to make them stay. Tell them that it's my order." The servant boy immediately left to carry out the order. Taoist he then turned to his disciple and said, "Jinglan, when that old demon's clone comes out of the formation, you'll deal with it." Hua Jinglan hurriedly replied, "Yes, master." Taoist Hao stared at him and said in a low voice, "Master can only help you this much. That old demon's clone is also at the mystic light realm like you, so master won't interfere. Whether you can get that body or not will depend on yourself." Hua Jinglan knew that Taoist he was testing him. This wasn't easy, but he didn't dare to disobey. He immediately said, "I'm already ashamed that master has taken care of me. I don't dare to trouble master again." Taoist he nodded. He glanced around and saw several dozens of Supreme Sky Sect disciples standing guard outside the formation door, and at least 100 of their friends and fellow Taoists had been invited, so there should not be any accidents. If this disciple of his still failed to obtain the Zoisha ancestor under such circumstances, then no matter how talented he was, there was no need for him to waste any more effort on him. At this moment, in the Green Inch Mountain, the Great Void Formation door opened. The thousands of cultivators inside the formation couldn't wait to come out. In the past 3 years, they had been attacked by Hibiko Higashi many times. Although they had the formation flags to protect them, they were still on tenterhooks all day long. They had been waiting to come out of the formation for a long time, so they didn't want to waste any more time. Hibiko Higashi also covered his face with a green aura and mixed in with the crowd. He already had a plan in mind. When he got out of the formation door, he would kill a few Taihao school disciples guarding the formation. At that time, it would definitely cause chaos. At that time, no one would notice Zhang Yan's whereabouts, and he would be able to smoothly take the Zoisha ancestor's body away. This plan was originally appropriate, but halfway there, before he could even make a move, the 5-spirit white carp shuttle in his sleeve suddenly leaped and swiftly struggled free from his body. His expression couldn't help but change greatly as he cursed in his heart. Ever since Ho Sanlang died, no matter how he tried to activate the shuttle, he couldn't move it, as if it had lost its spirituality. With his eyesight, he could naturally tell that this was caused by the original owner, but this Xian Guang doppelganger couldn't break it. Originally, he didn't take it to heart. Once his Yuanying doppelganger arrived, it would naturally be able to break the restriction, and he could use it again. But now that the formation was opened, this thing flew out, and this brilliance was too sudden and eye-catching. In an instant, it attracted everyone's attention, and they immediately knew that it was impossible to hide their bodies. The spirit shuttle was extremely eye-catching, and it immediately attracted Taoist He's attention. Almost at a glance, he recognized Hibiko Higashi's identity. His eyes flashed, and he immediately pointed his horsetail whisk down, and shouted, "Old demon is here. Disciple, what are you waiting for? Quickly kill him." Hearing this, Hua Jinglan hurriedly pulled himself together, and was about to attack. However, at this moment, a green aura that connected the heavens and the clouds spurted out from the horizon. In the blink of an eye, it turned into a green light and soared into the sky. When it was 1,000 feet away, it suddenly separated, and 2 women walked out. These 2 women looked exactly the same, as if they were a pair of twin sisters. The woman on the left had a red mole between her brows. She didn't have any accessories, and her skin was as white as snow. She wore plain clothes, and she was as elegant as a plum flower in winter. The woman on the right wore green jade earrings, and golden bells and jade rings hung around her. As she moved forward, the sound was extremely pleasing to the ear. Her eyes were like water, and when she looked around, she was extremely beautiful. Taoist nun Qingyao frowned, and said, "I heard that the demon sect's Jiling sect specializes in refining cultivators into their doppelgangers. This old demon has a strange background, and he's blessed with the Jiling sect's techniques. These 2 women must be his magical doppelgangers." Taoist Hao's expression was solemn, and he said, "That's right. Junior sister, be careful. The woman on the left is called Tan Ruoxue, and the woman on the right is called Tan Ruiyue. They used to be fellow Taoists from Mount Li sect, but they were both killed when they were cultivating in Yuanying. Don't underestimate them." Taoist nun Qingyao didn't care at first, but now that she heard this, her expression turned cold, and she said in a low voice, as expected of an evil demon from the outer path, sinister and treacherous. "If we let him obtain the Zoisha ancestor's body and escape the calamity, wouldn't he bring even more disaster to the world? It would have been fine if he didn't come today, but since he's already here, even if he has to sacrifice himself, he must stop this demon from escaping." While the 2 of them were talking, Han Guzi didn't even bother to ask any questions. He just looked around with his bloodshot eyes. Suddenly, his gaze sharpened, and it focused on a tall figure. Target =_blank. Chapter 252. On the 9-headed peak, Zhang Yan sat cross-legged on the stone platform. A yellowish mist floated behind his back and hung high above his head. It was moving slowly and changing its shape. The mist was thick and heavy. It was like a collapsing cloud, a giant rock, or a collapsing mountain. It was awe-inspiring. After Zhang Yan circulated the mist for a few times, he used a spell to collect it back into his body. He then kept his spiritual vigor and raised his head. In the blink of an eye, 2 years had passed. Due to various concerns, he did not burn his apertures or refine his acupoints. Instead, he focused all his attention on cultivating the mysterious true light. Water was the source of the 5 elements and earth was the mother of the 5 elements. Nothing could grow without earth and nothing could grow without water. The water element true light that he had previously cultivated was already slightly successful. It was impossible for him to improve it in a short period of time. Therefore, he chose to cultivate the earth element true light. Even with the help of the broken jade, he could only condense this ball of true light in the past 2 years. He was still far from releasing it to hurt people. He pinched his fingers and calculated. In a few more hours, it would be the time for Mount Qing Cun to open the formation. It was about time to move. He laughed and said, "The formation door is about to open, why hasn't Tong Er returned yet?" On a stone platform the size of a wheel outside the cave, a child was playing with a bright feathered chickadee. Upon hearing the greeting, the child responded crisply. He arched his small body and turned into a stream of clear air and went into his sleeve. Zhang Yan smiled. Sir Shi had passed away a year ago. Since he had promised to bring the child to the mortal world to play, he would not go back on his words. It was the right time to bring him out of the formation. He got up and walked out of the cave. He stood on the cliff and looked at the distant peak. Suddenly, the sky was illuminated by the green air and dyed the clouds green. Leaves fell and a green cloud flew over. A voice was heard in the air, "Li Dao, are you ready to go today?" Zhang Yan tiptoed and flew up the cloud. He stopped not far from Hibiko Higashi. He smiled and said, "Since I have an agreement with the Dongjin sect, I will naturally follow it. Don't worry, I will find a chance to escape after I get out of the formation." Hibiko Higashi said coldly, "That's good. The Ganoderma ancestor's body must not be lost. Just watch how I deal with it later. It should be able to open up a path for the Tao." Zhang Yan nodded slightly. They had already reached an agreement on this matter. After a few more words, they each sat down on the clouds and waited for the formation to open. At this moment, outside the formation door, the refined Taoist and the Taoist nun Qingyao had arrived. They were cupping their hands in greeting and congratulating each other. The two of them were surrounded by clear energy, causing fragrant flowers and strange birds to circle around them. Beneath his feet were gourd leaves, green and tender, swaying gently with the wind. Suddenly, a ray of light appeared beside them and a cough was heard. The two of them turned their heads and saw a white-bearded Taoist who was less than 3 feet tall. This person was sitting on a banana leaf. He was skinny and had a wrinkled face. He held a bamboo stick in his hand and a purplish-red gourd hung on his neck. His eyelids were drooping and he looked like he was half awake. It was Han Guzi, who Zhang Yan had met once in the Purple Bamboo Mountain. The refined Taoist asked curiously, "Junior apprentice brother, where did you come from?" His junior apprentice brother's Yuanying had long been broken by Qi Yuntian. He was holding onto a piece of pill jade and was struggling at death's door. He did not expect him to come here today. He did not know what method he used to get out of the mountain. Han Guzi said with a hoarse voice, "Senior apprentice brother, thank you for asking. I came here today because I have a knot in my heart." The refined Taoist nodded and did not ask any more. Ever since his junior apprentice brother's foundation was destroyed, he had a strange temper and was not easy to get close to. It was only because they were from the same sect that he did not greet him. Han Guzi's eyes were fixed on the formation door. That day, he had asked Yu Hongzhang to test Zhang Yan's background. However, Yu Hongzhang had agreed on the surface but disobeyed on the inside. He appeared respectful on the surface but in reality, he did not care about him at all. Ever since his foundation was destroyed, his temperament had changed greatly. He became more sensitive. Even when the disciples in the sect whispered to each other, they would suspect that they were secretly mocking him. Now that he was treated like this by a junior, he was even more embarrassed and angry. However, he also knew that he was not as good as he was in the past. The Yu clan was not something he could provoke. He was full of resentment and anger, but it involved Zhang Yan. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that Zhang Yan's background was strange. He swore in his heart that he would capture this person and ask him about it. That was why he came here on the day the formation opened. He also wanted to show others that he was not a useless person who could only hide in the mountain. On the other side, Taoist priestess Qingyao and the refined Taoist were talking and laughing. She looked at the young cultivator behind the refined Taoist. Seeing that the other had a handsome face, eyes like lacquer, hair tied up in a long robe, and stood out from the crowd, she said, "Senior brother Hao, is this your disciple?" Taoist Hao smiled and said, "Yes." He then scolded, "Jinglan, why haven't you come and greet martial uncle?" This young cultivator was quite respectful. He bowed to Taoist priestess Qin Yao and said, "Nephew Hu Jinglan greets martial uncle." Taoist priestess Qin Yao nodded with a smile and said, "No need to be so polite." Han Guzi looked over from afar. Seeing that Taoist, he had no intention of asking Hu Jinglan to greet him, as if he did not care about him at all. Han Guzi's face became even more gloomy. At the top of a mountain a few miles away, Ho Baksu stood far away with a few disciples of the Ho clan, looking at the mountains that were buried deep in the thick clouds. He couldn't help but frown. For some reason, Ho Baksu felt a little uneasy, but when he thought of Ho Sanlang having the help of the 5 Spirits White Carp shuttle, he felt that he was thinking too much. After an unknown amount of time, the misty smoke in the distant mountains reverberated, swaying like waves. The mist that had shrouded Mount Qing Cun for the past 3 years finally drifted away. As soon as the formation opened, a talisman flew out before anyone could be seen. Taoist He's expression brightened, and he reached out to receive it. Because the Great Void Defense Formation was closed, he did not know the situation in Mount Qing Cun. In order to prevent Hibiko Higashi from causing any trouble, he had arranged for a few disciples to enter the formation. This flying talisman was sent by one of them. When he activated the flying talisman, he frowned and thought to himself, how could there be such a change? Who is this Li Yuanba? Who has the Zoisha ancestor's body? After thinking for a while, he handed the flying talisman to a servant beside him and said, "Go take care of the disciples guarding the formation. When the people in the formation come out, if they see anyone who looks the same as the one in this talisman, try to make them stay. Say it's my order." The servant immediately left to carry out the order. Taoist He then turned to his disciple and said, "Jinglan, when the old demon's clone comes out of the formation, you will deal with it." Hu Jinglan hurriedly replied, "Yes, master." Taoist Hao stared at him and said in a deep voice, "Master can only help you this much. That old demon's clone is also at the mystic light realm like you, so master will not interfere. Whether you can take the body or not will depend on you." Hu Jinglan knew that Taoist He's action was also meant to test him. This was actually not easy, but he did not dare to disobey. He immediately said, "I am already ashamed to have received master's care. I dare not trouble master again." Taoist He nodded. He glanced around and saw several dozens of Supreme Sky Sect disciples guarding outside the formation door, and no less than 100 of their fellow Taoists had been invited, so there should not be any accidents. If this disciple of his still failed to obtain the Zoisha ancestor under such circumstances, then no matter how talented he was, there was no need for him to waste any more effort on him. At this moment, in Mount Qing Cun, the Great Void Formation door opened, and the thousands of cultivators inside the formation rushed out impatiently. In the past 3 years, they had been attacked by Hibiko Higashi many times. Although they had the formation flags to protect them, they were still on tenterhooks all day long. They had been waiting to leave the formation for a long time, so they did not want to waste any time and rushed out. Hibiko Higashi also covered his face with a green mist and mixed in with the crowd. He already had a plan in mind. When he got out of the formation door, he would kill a few Taihao school disciples guarding the formation. At that time, it would definitely cause chaos, and no one would notice Zhang Yan's whereabouts. He would be able to take the Zoisha ancestor's body away smoothly. This plan was originally appropriate, but halfway there, before he could even make a move, the 5-spirit White Carp shuttle in his sleeve suddenly leaped and swiftly struggled free from his body. His expression couldn't help but change greatly as he cursed in his heart. Ever since Ho Sanlang died, no matter how he tried to activate the shuttle, he could not move it, as if it had lost its spirituality. With his eyesight, he could naturally tell that this was caused by the original owner of the shuttle, but this Xian Guang doppelganger could not break it. Originally, he did not take it to heart. Once his Yuanying doppelganger arrived, it would naturally be able to break the restriction, and he could use it again. But now that the formation was opened, this thing flew out, and this brilliance was too sudden and eye-catching, instantly attracting everyone's attention. At that moment, he knew that it was impossible to conceal his body. The spirit shuttle was extremely eye-catching, and immediately attracted Taoist He's attention. Almost at a glance, he recognized Hibiko Higashi's identity. His eyes flashed, and he immediately pointed his horsetail whisk down, and shouted, "Old demon is here. Disciple, what are you waiting for? Quickly kill him." Hearing this, Hua Jinglan hurriedly pulled himself together, and was about to attack. However, at that moment, a green aura that connected the heavens and the clouds spurted out from the horizon. In the blink of an eye, it turned into a green light and soared into the sky. When it was 1,000 feet away, it suddenly separated, and two women walked out. These two women looked exactly the same, as if they were a pair of twin sisters. The woman on the left had a red mole between her brows, and she did not have any accessories. Her skin was as white as snow, and she wore plain clothes. She was as elegant as a plum flower in winter. The woman on the right wore green jade earrings, and golden bells and jade rings hung around her. As she moved with the wind, the jingling sounds were extremely pleasing to the ear. Her eyes were like water, and when she looked around, she was extremely beautiful. Taoist Nun Qingyao frowned and said, "I heard that the demon sect's Jiuling sect specializes in refining cultivators into their doppelgangers, and this old demon's background is strange. He is blessed by the Jiuling sect's techniques, and these two women must be his doppelgangers." Taoist Hao's expression was solemn, and he said, "That's right. Junior sister, be careful. The woman on the left is called Tan Ruoshui, and the woman on the right is called Tan Ruiyue. They were originally from the Li Mountain sect, but they were both killed when they were cultivating in Yuanying. Don't underestimate them." Taoist Nun Qingyao did not care at first, but now that she heard this, her expression turned cold, and she said in a low voice, as expected of an evil demon from the outer path, sinister and treacherous. "If we let him obtain the Zoisha ancestor's body and escape the calamity, won't he bring even more disaster to the world? It would have been fine if he didn't come today, but since he's already here, even if he has to sacrifice himself, he must stop this demon from escaping." While the two of them were talking, Han Guzi did not ask any questions. He only looked around with his bloodshot eyes. Suddenly, his gaze sharpened, and he fixed his eyes on a tall figure. To be continued. Target equals _blank. Chapter 253. Outside the Great Void Formation, there was a flying heaven memorial archway that faintly covered the formation entrance. A golden bell hung under the archway, and several Taihao school disciples stood on both sides. Among them, there was a tall core formation cultivator with cold eyes and cold eyebrows standing in the middle of the archway. Any cultivator who came out of the formation had to hand over their token to him, and he would then compare it to the map before entering the mountain to verify that no one was impersonating him. Just now, he could let them pass. The golden bell hanging on the archway was a secret technique of the Taihao school. If a cultivator with a copper bamboo token took out too many medicinal mushrooms, the bell would ring when the metal and wood chi collided. At that time, the core formation cultivator would take the medicinal mushrooms and not break the rules. According to Hibiko Higashi's original plan, he was going to make a move when he passed the archway, but because of the 5-spirit white carp shuttle, he was exposed early. Knowing that he had been exposed, he simply stopped pretending. With a shout, he invited the blue cloud to come out of the archway, turned into a blue light, and flew out, wanting to pass through the archway. When the core formation cultivator saw that not only was Su Kei not afraid of him, but he was also coming towards him, he couldn't help but open his eyes in anger and shout, "How dare you!" He raised his hand and clapped, and a cloud of smoke broke through the air and pressed down. Hibiko Higashi's eyes narrowed, but he didn't dodge. He raised the blue cloud above his head to meet the cloud of smoke. With a muffled rumble of thunder, the green cloud collapsed as if it was being ravaged by a violent gale. Dong Jinzi also spat out a few mouthfuls of blood, but she raised her sleeves to wipe the blood off her face. Her figure did not stop as she charged straight towards the gate. The core formation cultivator didn't expect that Hibiko Higashi would dare to fight him head-on. Seeing Hibiko Higashi's face full of killing intent, he didn't know why, but he felt a chill in his heart. After a moment of hesitation, he dodged to the side. When the core formation cultivator brushed past him, he said, "Hey." He raised his hand. Another cloud of smoke was sent out. Hibiko Higashi was already prepared for this. He turned around and spat out a mouthful of green air, mixing it with the smoke. With a few popping sounds, the smoke was actually stopped. He charged out unscathed. At the same time, the golden bell above the gate also rang loudly. This core formation cultivator had originally planned to take down Hibiko Higashi with this attack. However, he was not injured at all. Just as he was surprised and suspicious, Hu Jinglan arrived. Seeing Hibiko Higashi walk out of the gate, he waved his sleeve, and a white light flew towards him. Although Hibiko Higashi looked fine on the surface, his physical body was already close to its limit. Seeing the ferocity of the white light, it was already too late to dodge. He only had enough time to move his body sideways before he let out a blood-curdling scream. Half of his shoulder had been sliced off. Hu Jinglan shouted out in the air, "Senior Brother Qi, be careful. This person is a demon from the Jiling sect. Don't let him go." So he's a cultivator from the demon sect. The expression of the core formation cultivator called Senior Brother Qi darkened. "Junior brother, don't worry. With me here, I definitely won't let this person go." Hibiko Higashi looked around and saw that there were more than 10 cultivators surrounding him. He knew that with the help of a core formation cultivator, he wouldn't be able to hold on for long. Suddenly, a vicious look appeared on his face. Senior Brother Qi suddenly felt the spiritual energy around him stir like a tidal wave, and his expression changed. "Not good. Junior brothers, hide." Dong Jinzi forced out her spirit energy and let out a wild roar, causing the avatar to explode. With a loud boom, balls of green light danced in the air and scattered in all directions. The dozen or so cultivators present instantly let out howls, and a few of them were knocked off their clouds. Senior Brother Qi was the first to be hit, but he was a core formation cultivator after all. He waved his sleeves, and streams of smoke flew out, blocking the waves of green light that were rushing towards him. But this way, he couldn't care about helping his fellow sect members. Although Hu Jinglan's cultivation was high, he was caught off guard and was hit by a beam of green light. He was shaken so much that he almost vomited blood, and hurriedly flew back several tens of feet. Then, he felt as if he was being pricked by needles, and he hurriedly looked for a place to land. He took out a pill from his sleeves and swallowed it. Then, he used his mysterious technique, and wisps of green smoke came out of his eyes, ears, mouth, and nose. When he finished using his technique, his complexion turned slightly better. Zhang Yan had been following behind Hibiko Higashi not too far away. When he saw that Hibiko Higashi had abandoned this clone and forced the surrounding guards away, he knew his chance had come. Riding the wind, he leaped out from under the door and passed through it. Not to mention the fact that he was carrying the Zoisha ancestor's shell, just the wood chi of the transformed Zoisha child was not something ordinary medicinal Zoishas could compare to. So, as soon as he passed through the door, the golden bell above him swayed left and right, clanging and ringing loudly. Hu Jinglan originally thought that the Zoisha ancestor's shell had been destroyed along with Hibiko Higashi, so she was vexed. But when she heard this sound, her whole body trembled, and she looked at Zhang Yan in surprise. But a moment later, her eyes lit up again. Suddenly, she stood up, pointed at Zhang Yan, and shouted, "Fellow sect members, don't let this person escape." Taoist He, who was in the air, also heard the sound of the bell, but before he could divert his attention to look, the two women who were flying over on the opposite side shouted in unison. Two yuanying with multicolored light flew out from the top of the door. For a moment, the red light was like water, peach petals fell, and in the midst of the gorgeous petals, a long rainbow flew across the blue sky, rushing towards the door. Before it arrived, enchanting red branches shot out from the air like lightning. Taoist priestess Qingyao and Taoist He were both shocked. If they let these flowers fall, it would definitely affect the Taihao school disciples who were surrounding the formation. How could they dare to let it come over? Immediately, Taoist He took a step forward and activated his Xian Qi. A cloud of white mist flew out from the top of the door, carrying a pale golden yuanying with a rattan cane on its back. This yuanying stepped on smoke and rose up. With a wave of its hand, a clear light rippled out, blocking the red branches that were like rain. Taoist priestess Qingyao also waved the horsetail whisk in her hand, and a yuanying also flew out from the door. This yuanying's face was similar to hers, emitting a white light, and its body was surrounded by multicolored flowers, like fallen flowers in a courtyard, colorful and brilliant. In a flash, these four yuanying were fighting together. Only the sound of thunder could be heard in the air, hundreds of rays of light crisscrossed back and forth, clouds of green gas and multicolored clouds collided, bursting with dazzling brilliance. Just one look at this kind of battle between Taoist masters would make one dizzy, their breath stagnant. How could the surrounding cultivators dare to come close? They all moved away. On the other side, Han Guzi sat still, not paying attention to the others. His gaze was already locked on Zhang Yan. At this moment, when he saw Zhang Yan pass under the door, a cold smile appeared on his face. He raised his hand and grabbed forward, a ball of green lightning appeared in his palm, and then he threw it down. With a ka-la sound, a ray of lightning struck down. Zhang Yan originally wanted to use the minor movement escape technique after coming out of the door, but when he suddenly saw the lightning attack, he hurriedly made a hand sign and released the two golden hammers in front of him to block. Suddenly, there was a sound of metal cracking in the air. The two golden hammers were hit by the green lightning, and with a tremble, they were sent flying hundreds of feet away. Zhang Yan looked up and met Han Guzi's eyes. He almost immediately recognized the identity of this Daoren, and his heart trembled slightly. Although he knew that this person's yuanying had been killed, his foundation had been destroyed, and his magic power was similar to that of a core transformation stage cultivator, but he was still not someone he could deal with in front of him. Han Guzi's beard trembled, and he shouted, "Li Yuanba, are you not going to surrender?" He sat on the banana leaf and waved his sleeves. Lightning bolts fell one after another, attacking Zhang Yan like hail rain. Zhang Yan saw that the lightning bolts were coming at him so quickly, but he didn't have time to cast any techniques. Just as he was about to dodge, he glanced around and saw Hu Jinglan swimming outside, blocking his path and glaring at him like a tiger watching its prey. On the other side, senior brother Qi, who was forced away by Hibiko Higashi, also rushed over with a calm face. His heart couldn't help but move, and immediately pretended to be flustered. After dodging a few lightning bolts, he pretended that he couldn't dodge, and was immediately hit by one of the lightning bolts. He was wearing Xiao Han's 7-star treasure robe, so when he was hit by the green lightning, he only felt his body go slightly numb, but he wasn't injured. His eyes flashed, and he relaxed his body, as if he had lost his mind, and fell down. Because Hu Jinglan didn't know Zhang Yan's background, when she saw Han Guzi hit him with a lightning bolt, she couldn't help but be overjoyed. When Zhang Yan was already seriously injured, she hurriedly shouted, "Martial uncle, please wait, this person has a treasure that my master wants. You can't destroy it, wait for me to go get it." Then she leaped up and pounced forward. With this shout, not only did Han Guzi stop, even senior brother Qi, who was originally surrounding him, had no choice but to stop. Hu Jinglan stepped forward and put his hand on Zhang Yan's shoulder, and just as he was about to pull him back, he stretched out his hand to take Zhang Yan's sleeve. But at this moment, he felt a pain in his wrist, it was grabbed by a hand, and Zhang Yan had already turned around, revealing an expression that was not a smile to him, then raised his hand and punched towards him. Hu Jinglan instantly turned pale with fright, he wanted to dodge, but it was too late. This punch landed on his chest with a hong sound, and in an instant, his sternum was broken, his internal organs were smashed, and blood spurted out of his mouth. He fainted on the spot. Fortunately, Zhang Yan still had use for him, so he didn't immediately want his life, but grabbed him and clamped him under his armpit. Seeing this scene, Han Guzi couldn't help but be shocked and angry. "Junior, how dare you?" He originally wanted to release a few more green lightning bolts, but Hu Jinglan was being restrained by Zhang Yan, so he was afraid to take action. His hand had already been raised, but he could only forcefully stop himself. His face twitched, he suddenly stood up, and was about to reach for the purple-red gourd hanging on the bamboo walking stick. Although Zhang Yan didn't know what it was, he knew that it wasn't something easy to deal with. Now that he had a chance, he didn't want to waste any more time, and hurriedly formed a hand seal, activating the lesser shift escape technique. Just as Han Guzi took down the purple-red gourd, before he could even use it, he saw a flash of light in front of him, and Zhang Yan disappeared without a trace. Han Guzi couldn't help but be startled. He looked up and saw a black dot in the distance. He immediately let out an angry roar, and also activated his body, transforming into a ray of light to chase after him. Zhang Yan looked back, and saw that Han Guzi was chasing closely behind him. He laughed in his heart, and used force to strangle Hu Jinglan to death, and casually threw him away. He then took out a strand of essence qi from the Jin Dan in his abdomen, and in a few breaths of time, he repeatedly used this technique. Han Guzi saw that Zhang Yan's escape light was like a shooting star, and in a flash, he had gone even further away. In the end, he could only watch helplessly as the ray of light completely disappeared into the distance, and had no choice but to stop. Under the attack of anger, he roared towards the sky, and suddenly felt a sweetness in his throat, and spat out a mouthful of blood. Target equals _blank. Chapter 254. Unfortunately, he did not have a day off today, so he changed it to tomorrow. He would continue to write at night and guarantee that he would be able to read another chapter by noon the next day. After leaving Mount Qing Cun, Zhang Yan carefully found a secluded place to land, took out the Thousand Illusions illustrated manual, and kept Li Yuanba's appearance. He circled around, and seeing that no one was following him, he returned to Baofeng Monastery. He traveled as fast as lightning, and in a few days he was able to see the outline of Zhurong Mountain. Then he followed the torrential river water southward. In less than an hour, he saw a mark that he had left earlier. He leaped into the river water, parted the waves, and went to look for an immortal's cave underwater. This place was established by him 3 years ago, and it was the hiding place of the mother and son from the Qin clan. The surroundings of the abode was covered in a palace suppression formation that was personally established by him, so it was naturally unable to obstruct him. He formed seals with his hands and passed through the entrance of the abode without any obstruction and headed straight towards the depths of the ground. As soon as he entered the cave, Zhang Pan, who was meditating in the cave, was the first to notice. He leapt out to take a look, and couldn't help but exclaim in surprise, "Is Master back?" Zhang Yan paused, his hands behind his back, and said with a smile, "It's me." Zhang Pan hurriedly stepped forward and bowed, saying, "This little one greets Master." For a monster like Zhang Pan, his heart was simple, and he was patient. 3 years was just a moment, so he did not feel anything during the time they were apart. Zhang Yan nodded, and asked, "Let me ask you, during the time we were apart, did you take good care of Lady Chen and her son?" Zhang Pan respectfully replied, "Master, this little one did not dare to neglect them, and for the past 3 years, they are doing well." If it was an ordinary servant, after Zhang Yan said these few words, he did not need to pay much attention to know that Lady Chen and her son should be summoned. But after Zhang Pan heard these words, he still stood there woodenly. Zhang Yan knew his temperament, so he did not take it seriously. To him, it was good to have people with this kind of temperament. They didn't need to be smart, they just needed to be obedient and loyal. Thus, he said in a deep voice, "I want to see them." "Go and summon the mother and son." Zhang Pan hurriedly agreed and turned around to walk inside. Only now did Zhang Yan take a good look at the furnishings in the cave. He saw that the cave walls were embedded with many pearls and colored stones. The whole area was bright, similar to the daytime, making people feel as if they were in an underground cave. The cave also had all kinds of stone tables and stools, and there was a faint fragrance of flowers that seeped into the heart and lungs. Back then, when he opened this cave dwelling, he only roughly dug out a few chambers. Zhang Pan, on the other hand, was a straightforward person. Naturally, he did not have the time to set up these things. It was obvious that this was the work of Madame Chen. He had only waited for a short while when he heard footsteps. He turned around and saw Zhang Pan in front of him, followed by Mrs. Chen. In her hand was a little boy with a lock of hair hanging down. That boy was sturdy, looking about 7 or 8 years old. But his expression was wooden and honest, unlike the usual lively children. Madame Chen's eyebrows were covered with a layer of worry. She forced a smile at Zhang Yan and said, "Your servant greets Priest Zhang. It's been 3 years since we last met, but Priest is still as elegant as ever." She pressed lightly on the back of the child and scolded, "What is my son doing here? Hurry up and greet benevolent master." Her heart was also complicated. This child could walk a month after he was born and he grew very quickly. But there was one bad thing about him. He was simple-minded and had no intelligence at all. Everything had to be taught more than 10 times before he could do it. In these 3 years, she had been worried about the gains and losses, afraid that Zhang Yan would not accept her child as a disciple. The child didn't dare to disobey his mother's order. He hurriedly went forward and kowtowed, saying, "This child greets benevolent master." Zhang Yan smiled and said pleasantly, "No need to be so courteous. Stand up." "Oh." The child stood up obediently and stood to the side. Zhang Yan looked at him and nodded his head. He then asked Madame Chen, "Did Madame Chen give this child a name?" Madame Chen sighed and said, "I am a woman, so this name should be given to my husband. Unfortunately, he has already left to learn the immortal Tao. I think he doesn't want me and my son anymore. My surname is Tian. Since Taoist Zhang has taken me as his disciple, a teacher for a day, a father for life, I would like to trouble Taoist Zhang to name this child." After saying these words, Madame Chen was out of breath and lightly coughed a few times. Ever since she gave birth to this child, her body had been deteriorating. She would feel tired after standing for a long time. Even after taking the many medicinal pills given by Zhang Pan, her condition didn't improve. The child saw this and hurriedly ran forward to massage his mother's back. Madame Chen frowned and said, "I don't need you to take care of me here. Why aren't you moving a seat for your benevolent master?" The child replied with an, "Oh," and ran to the side. Using his 2 small hands, he easily lifted a stone stool that was the weight of an adult. He walked a few steps and placed it in front of Zhang Yan. He raised his head and said with a crisp child's voice, "Benevolent master, please sit." Zhang Yan nodded slightly and said, "Okay." Then he sat down. He looked at the child and his heart was filled with emotions. Just by looking at this child's obedient appearance, who would have thought that he was a great demon that could shake the world? No matter how high one's cultivation level was, after reincarnation, the memory of one's previous life would become a thing of the past. He pondered for a while, then smiled and said to Madame Chen, "I see that this child has clear eyes and a sincere temperament. When he walks, his legs are strong and strong. He doesn't sway and doesn't seem to have the strength of 10,000 pounds. I will give him a name. Let's call him Kuan." Madame Chen repeated the name twice, "Tian Kuan, Tian Kuan." She nodded lightly and glared at her child. She scolded, "Child, why aren't you kneeling down and kowtowing to thank benevolent master for giving you a name?" Tian Kuan was most afraid of his mother. Hearing her scolding, he hurriedly kneeled down and kowtowed again. Actually, Madame Chen was worried for nothing. The karma between Zhang Yan and Guo Songyao was very deep. It wasn't something that could be abandoned just like that. Even if this child really couldn't enter Dao, he would guarantee that he wouldn't have to worry about food and clothing for the rest of his life. What's more, in Madame Chen's eyes, stupidity, in Zhang Yan's eyes, was a piece of rough gold and unpolished jade. Zhang Yan received a few kowtows from Tian Kun, but no one called him. He didn't know to stop and continued to kowtow. Zhang Yan smiled and pulled him up. He then said to Madame Chen, "Madame Chen, this time I came back just to see if my disciple is doing well. I still have other important matters to attend to. I will return in at least 3 to 5 years, at most 7 to 8 years. At that time, I will bring Kun back to the sect. I will leave Zhang Pan here to take care of you and your son." Madame Chen grew up in her uncle's house. She vaguely knew that a Taoist like Zhang Yan was different from a normal Taoist. He was especially particular about fate and couldn't be judged by common sense. She thought that he had some kind of arrangement and hurriedly said, "It's okay, I will teach this child well. If Taoist has something to do, please go ahead." Zhang Yan nodded his head. He stood up and said to Tian Kun, "Kun, you are still young and can't learn the best techniques. I will give you this incantation, practice it well." As he finished, he raised his hand and took out a talisman. He slapped it on the back of his head and the talisman disappeared in a flash. The origin of this talisman wasn't simple. It was personally drawn by Gui Zongyao. Today, he borrowed Zhang Yan's hand and used it on the reincarnated child. Tian Kun stood there in a daze for a moment. Suddenly, he was enlightened and seemed to understand many things. He knelt down respectfully and said, "Thank you, Master, for bestowing the incantation." Zhang Yan laughed out loud. He flicked his sleeve and threw out many medicinal pellets. He then turned into a gust of wind and flew out of the underwater cave. He leaped up into the sky, determined the direction, and flew towards the Shindu Peak. Shindu Peak was located in the north of Donghua continent. It was far away from here. Zhang Yan still had 2 acupoints in his body that hadn't been opened, so he wasn't in a hurry. He walked and stopped along the way, admiring the scenery and comprehending the will of heaven. When he left, it was still early spring. It was the time when all living things were budding and the glaciers were melting. The great rivers carried ice shards and rushed down. This kind of power of heaven and earth was really powerful. When he arrived at Shindu Peak, it was already a month later. The grass was long and the orioles were flying. Green mountains and jade peaks were everywhere. Birds were singing and flowers were fragrant. It was full of vitality. At this moment, he stood on the peak of a mountain. As far as the eye could see, he saw that the main peak of Shindu Peak was hidden in the clouds. Around the main peak, there were hundreds of strange and dangerous mountains. The peak was faintly discernible in the clouds like a floating island. If he passed this vast mountain and went north for another 150,000 miles, he would be in the North Dark Star continent that was filled with demons. Perhaps because it was the place where the 2 continents intersected, there were many strange things about the Shindu Peak. Every peak had a thunder lake. In summer, whenever the heaven and earth intersected and the clouds and rain came, the thunder lake would be shaken, causing lightning and thunder to rumble. This lightning was born lightning, and it had the ability to nourish all things. To demons that hadn't taken human form, it had the ability to cleanse their marrow and strengthen their inner chi. Thus, at this time every year, countless demon beasts from the North Dark Star continent and East Flower continent would gather here to bathe in lightning and cultivate. The more the demon beasts underwent lightning, the better the quality of the tempered marrow in their spines would be. Before Zhang Yan came here, he'd once read the book that Yan Jingting gave him, and it clearly described the various methods to obtain the tempered marrow. However, even though it seemed to be easy to obtain, there were many taboos and difficulties, and it frequently caused numerous cultivators to fight and kill each other. Thus, he had to ponder carefully before he could obtain it, Zhang Yan thought to himself. Summer hasn't arrived yet, and I have nothing to do right now. Why don't I go take a look around those immortal markets and ask someone to forge a lightning absorption gold disc? It wouldn't be too late to think about anything else after that. Because there were cultivators coming and going here all year round, there were also several flying boat immortal markets. Here, even the best-tempered marrow could be bought. However, Zhou Chengju had warned him that the tempered marrow and the Chuejue thunder were two different items. If he didn't obtain them at the same time, no matter how good their effects were, they would still be inferior. Thus, he didn't plan to purchase these two items from the immortal markets. However, there were many people in the flying boat immortal markets. He guessed that if someone wanted to deal with him, such as the Ho clan, and they couldn't find him everywhere in the East Flower continent, it was very likely that they were waiting there. If that was the case, he couldn't use his current appearance. After a moment of silence, he raised his sleeve and took out the 1000 Illusion Illustrated Handbook. He flipped through a few pages and chose the appearance of an unremarkable young man. With a slight shake of his body, he chanted a spell, and a golden light flashed past. He turned into the appearance of the person in the painting, and then he flew up into the sky, transforming into a green light. Yes. Target equals _blank. Chapter 255. The celestial market on the Divine Crossing Peak was extremely grand, and it was completely different from what Zhang Yan had seen before. There were 16 golden bridges on the peak that protruded out of the sea of clouds. They were connected to each other with golden locks and mystic stones, locking up thousands of celestial boats. The celestial boat in the middle was especially large, and it was comparable to the Dragon Country's boats. It could be said that even the main roads of the mortal world couldn't be compared to it. There were tall pavilions everywhere, flying into the clouds. Cultivators could travel on the clouds as they pleased, moving about unhindered. Along the way, the people Zhang Yan saw were all Taoists and cultivators riding on magical artifacts or celestial birds. They were all in groups of 3 to 5 and they traveled together. Among the 100 or so people, there were several mystic light realm cultivators, and he even saw a few core formation cultivators from afar. Whenever they came over, they would all move aside and let them go first. Zhang Yan didn't want to attract attention, so after a few rounds, he came to a remote corner. He looked around and saw a 6-story building with a jade board hanging on it. The words, "Precious Jade Building," were written on it, but there were only a few people going in and out. Looking at this sign, his heart moved, and he suddenly remembered that there was an elder with the surname Yu in Elder Yan's sect who had mentioned this place in the past. It was said that there was an expert blacksmith in this tower who could create a lightning-absorbing golden plate. However, the owner of this tower didn't have any background, and he was afraid that this news would cause trouble for him, so not many people knew about it. Since he was already here, he might as well go in and take a look. Zhang Yan turned the cloud around and flew into the tower. When he arrived in the lobby, a person immediately came up to greet him on a lotus leaf. This person was short and chubby, and he had a warm smile on his face. From his aura alone, he was at the mystic light realm. He came up and clasped his hands. "This one's surname is Wang, and I'm the manager of this precious jade tower. May I ask what you need?" Zhang Yan didn't hide anything and said, "I'm here to ask for a lightning-absorbing golden plate." Lightning-absorbing golden plate? The smile on the manager's face didn't change. He looked up and down at Zhang Yan and asked, "Pardon me for asking, but how did this honorable guest know that this humble store has this item for sale?" Zhang Yan smiled and said, "I have an elder who came to your esteemed establishment as a guest 212 years ago. He used your esteemed establishment's golden plate lightning absorption pill to obtain medicine. Later on, he succeeded in condensing his dan, so I came because of your reputation." "Oh." Steward Wang's expression changed. He looked at Zhang Yan a few more times before nodding his head lightly. With a wave of his hand, a female attendant beside him walked into the inner hall. Before long, the female attendant was carrying a lacquer box covered with a silk handkerchief. Steward Wang pointed at it and said with a smile, "This is a lightning-absorbing golden plate made by an expert. Honorable guest, please take a look." Is it pleasing to the eye? Zhang Yan took it and removed the silk handkerchief. He opened the lid and saw that there was a piece of soft cloth inside the box. On top of the cloth was a golden copper plate. It was a foot long and about half a finger thick. There were runes of the 8 trigrams on the outside of the plate. The plate had 7 holes and 7 orifices arranged according to the position of the Big Dipper. With a little bit of spiritual energy, it would make a buzzing sound. This lightning-absorbing golden plate wasn't a rare item. It could only be used to absorb lightning. But in terms of value, it was a level higher than an artifact. This was because the Chuejue thunder produced on God's Crossing Peak wasn't exactly the same. There were different types of thunder and lightning. If this golden plate was made well, then the lightning it absorbed would naturally not be inferior. For Zhang Yan, this item couldn't be underestimated. He examined it briefly and found that this golden plate was indeed a rare high-grade artifact. Satisfied, he put it down and asked, "Steward Wang, what's the price of this item?" Steward Wang smiled and didn't answer directly. Instead, he said politely, "I see that honorable guest has come from afar. I have some top-notch celestial tea here that can adjust your spirit. Why don't you sit down and drink while we talk?" Zhang Yan glanced at Steward Wang and saw that he was smiling. There seemed to be a deeper meaning in his eyes. It was obvious that he had something to discuss with him. After thinking for a while, he nodded and said, "Very well." The steward's face lit up, and he led Zhang Yan to the rear courtyard. There was an exquisite little pavilion here, and it was adjacent to a lotus pond. Inside, carps were jumping about, making splashing sounds. The stone benches were covered with soft fur cushions, and they looked extremely elegant. When the two of them sat down, the maids served tea and then left. The steward cupped his hands and said, "How should I address you, honorable guest?" Zhang Yan thought for a while and borrowed Elder Yu's surname. He made up a fake name and said, "I am Zhang Yan." "So it's Elder Yu." Steward Wang secretly calculated and found that it matched the person in his memory. Even though he was still young at that time and the person who called out to Elder Yu was his grandfather, he was a cultivator and the memory was still fresh in his mind. Thus, the doubts in his heart dissipated a little. The two of them chatted for a while. Under Steward Wang's intentional or unintentional probing, Zhang Yan also talked about Elder Yu's past. Steward Wang felt more at ease and his attitude became more amiable. In the end, he changed the topic and led the topic to the golden plate. "Why don't you tell Elder Yu that when I was making this item, I used no less than 1,000 spirit shells. However, this item has no other use other than to absorb lightning and extract medicine. Moreover, after the lightning passes through the plate, this item is useless. If Elder Yu wants to buy it, I think it's not worth it." Although Zhang Yan didn't care about the 1,000 spirit shells, what Steward Wang said wasn't wrong. He also wanted to know why Steward Wang invited him here, so he followed along and asked, "Then what does Steward Wang think?" Steward Wang sighed and said, "I have a brother who went out to find a master a few years ago. He was lucky and barely reached the 3rd level of the mystic light realm. Right now, he's looking for pills and medicine. However, he's too ambitious and wants to use an owl as medicine. He's afraid that people will come to fight for it, so he's asking his friends to help him." The hidden refinement marrow came from the bodies of hundreds of demonic birds. Among them, 4 were the best: the heavenly crane, the golden eagle, the swan, and the owl. However, these 4 demonic birds often attracted many cultivators to fight over them. Manager Wang's intention was to ask Zhang Yan to protect his brother. This request wasn't too much. Normally, it would only take 1 to 4 hours to collect medicine. The Divine Crossing Peak was huge, and if Steward Wang acted in time, he might not be able to fight for it. However, when Zhang Yan heard this, his eyes flashed and he was slightly puzzled. The North Star Sect's book once said that these 4 types of demon birds were often rare and extremely difficult to find. From Steward Wang's words, he vaguely revealed that this did not seem to be a difficult matter. Curiosity arose in his heart, and he intended to take a look. However, he did not agree immediately. Instead, he said calmly, "Steward Wang, why have you come to me for this matter?" Steward Wang laughed, pointed to himself, and said meaningfully, "This lowly one has seen many cultivators from the south to the north, so this pair of eyes can also see through people. Fellow Taoist has many extraordinary qualities, so how could this lowly one not see them?" Although Zhang Yan didn't act ostentatiously and his appearance was not eye-catching, his actions were calm and confident. Steward Wang was a person with sharp eyes and had come into contact with many disciples from large sects when he was young. In his view, Zhang Yan's temperament was quite similar to theirs. Most importantly, Zhang Yan was very likely to be Elder Yu's junior. Therefore, he felt at ease and invited him. Perhaps they could even form a new relationship. Zhang Yan thought to himself. According to his original plan, after purchasing the golden plate, he would find a place to settle down and refine the remaining 2 apertures. During this period of time, he would familiarize himself with the terrain of the mountains and rivers around Shindu Peak, as well as the movements of the demonic birds. Finally, he would pick the herbs. Now that Brother Steward Wang seemed to have a secret technique in his hands, he might as well take a look at it. After making up his mind, he nodded and smiled, "Since Taoist Wang has invited me, I can't refuse." Steward Wang was overjoyed to see him agree. He called for a maid and said, "Go to my wine cellar and bring me a few jars of good wine. I want to drink with Taoist Yu. What is elder brother so happy about?" At this moment, 4 people walked into the courtyard. There were both men and women. The one who spoke was very young. Although his appearance was average, his clothes were luxurious and he looked quite elegant. Steward Wang stood up and smiled, "Taoist Yu, this is my good-for-nothing second brother, Wang Huan. Come, second brother, come and greet Taoist Yu." Wang Huan looked at Zhang Yan with surprise. He was also a clever person and could immediately tell that Zhang Yan was not a simple person. He immediately stepped forward and greeted, "Are you Taoist Yu? Little brother Wang Huan greets you." Zhang Yan smiled and cupped his fists in return. Steward Wang said to Wang Huan, "Didn't you say that picking herbs isn't easy and that you wanted me to ask for help? This Taoist Yu has a profound cultivation and elder Taoist Yu had some friendship with our treasure jade pavilion in the past, so he isn't an outsider." Wang Huan's eyes lit up. Although he was not a steward, he knew that when his grandfather was alive, the people he met were all disciples of the righteous sections. It was only after his grandfather passed away that these friendships gradually faded. He couldn't help but think, if that's the case, then this Taoist Yu has an extraordinary background. With this thought, his expression became even warmer and he repeatedly cupped his hands towards Zhang Yan. "Very good, very good. When the time comes, I hope that Taoist Yu will be able to help me." However, at this moment, an eyebrowless cultivator coldly said, "Wait." Wang Huan was startled. The eyebrowless cultivator stood in front of him and bluntly said, "Taoist Wang, picking herbs is an important matter. I don't know this Taoist Yu's cultivation, so I believe that we should be careful." Steward Wang's face darkened and revealed some displeasure. "This." Wang Huan hesitated and said, "Since Taoist Yu was invited by my brother, his cultivation must be high." The eyebrowless cultivator coldly said, "It's not that I want to be calculative, but this owl is also an ancient species and is not easy to find. It would be bad if someone were to drag us down. Brother Wang and I know each other very well, so there will be no problems. If we don't know this Taoist Yu's ability, how can we trust each other? Don't you think so?" This person was quite eloquent and his words were reasonable. However, these questions could always be discussed in private. Saying it out loud was clearly not giving Steward Wang any face. However, Wang Huan was clearly a soft-hearted person and nodded in agreement. He said, "In that case, why don't we ask Taoist Yu to show us the light?" Steward Wang hesitated for a moment but did not say anything. He only lightly snorted. Zhang Yan did not mind. If it was a disciple of a big sect, he would be able to roughly determine a person's cultivation by looking at their aura and spiritual vigor. For a rogue cultivator, if his cultivation was not high enough and the other party did not show the light, he would not be able to determine the specific depth of the person's cultivation. He smiled faintly and released the mysterious light from the carefree scripture. Everyone only saw a flash of green light in front of them and a green color rose up. It was full of vitality and a fragrant scent filled the air. It seemed that the circulation of qi in their bodies became smoother. Unconsciously, they were all moved. Yes. Target equals _blank. Chapter 256. That day, Zhang Yan stayed in a flying pavilion under Steward Wang's arrangement. After entering a quiet room, he didn't come out and meditated all day long. About a month later, when it was the official day of herb picking, he was invited to the main hall by a maid. When he arrived outside, there were already more than 20 people there. They were all calling their friends and it was very lively. It seemed like they weren't going to pick herbs, but to visit friends. Zhang Yan took a few glances and found that most of them were at the clear qi realm. Only Wang Huan and a few others were at the mystic light realm. Seeing Zhang Yan walk into the hall, Wang Huan warmly welcomed him and cupped his hands. Ayaya, Daoist Yu, I've neglected you these days. Daoist Yu's cultivation is very profound. If I want to complete this task, I will need your help. Although Wang Huan didn't have many ideas and was easily influenced by others, he was a smooth talker. His mouth was full of praises and he even said it in a very polite manner. He could make people have a good impression of him. The mystic light that Zhang Yan displayed that day was very pure. It was obvious that he was from the orthodox mystic gate. Wang Huan asked his elder brother about it and guessed that this Daoist Yu's background wasn't that simple. Even if he wasn't from a big sect, he must have some connections with them. Wandering cultivators like them couldn't compare to him. Therefore, he felt that even if he couldn't rely on someone like Daoist Yu, he couldn't easily offend him. Zhang Yan smiled and returned the greeting. Daoist Wang, there's no need to be so polite. Speaking of which, my cultivation is really not worth mentioning. Wang Huan smiled. Daoist Yu is too humble, too humble. The eyebrowless Daoist's eyes flickered. He coughed and said, Daoist Wang, if there's nothing else, I think we shouldn't delay any longer. That Yao Shao is a suspicious person. If we miss the time, we might be discovered by others. That would be bad. Wang Huan agreed wholeheartedly and excused himself to Zhang Yan. He then turned to the people in the hall and said, fellow Taoists, Wang Huan, will have to rely on all of you today when I go out to gather herbs. If I can successfully condense my core, I will not let you down. Everyone in the hall responded loudly, saying that they would help each other. Zhang Yan glanced at them. He could understand the hardships of these unorthodox itinerant cultivators. Firstly, these people had no good techniques. Secondly, they had no elixirs or artifacts. Even their sects could not be counted on too much. It was extremely difficult to cultivate. Under such circumstances, it would be extremely difficult for a lone cultivator to cultivate. Only by supporting each other and helping each other could they move forward. If one of them obtained the opportunity to attain the Tao, they would have to repay the karma they owed to him, and his friends would also benefit from it. Thus, the group of people before him was sincerely helping Wang Huan. At this time, Steward Wang squeezed out from the crowd and came to Zhang Yan's side. He said in a low voice, Priest Yu, please come here and talk. Zhang Yan nodded and followed Steward Wang out of the main hall and into a side hall. Steward Wang took out the golden plate from his sleeve and handed it over to Zhang Yan with both hands. He said, tonight, fellow Daoist is going out with my second brother to gather herbs, so this item should be given to fellow Daoist. Zhang Yan accepted it without hesitation. He smiled and said, don't worry, Steward Wang. If nothing unexpected happens, I will protect your younger brother. Steward Wang bowed deeply to him and said, I will rely on Priest Yu. At this time, Wang Huan shouted from the hall. He was the first to fly out. When he reached the outer room, he turned in the air and headed south. Everyone else also rode on their mystic artifacts and rushed out of the building to follow him. Seeing that everyone had left, Zhang Yan bid farewell to Steward Wang and used the mystic artifact to carry his body out of the treasure jade tower. Looking at the streaks of light in front of him, he lightly activated the mystic artifact and chased after them. At this time, it was the beginning of summer. The moon hung high in the sky and the Milky Way shone brightly. The celestial market was already decorated with bright pearls and colorful lanterns. There were many cultivators coming and going. Although Wang Huan's group's cultivation wasn't high, they were impressive. As they flew, the cultivators on both sides gave way to them. Occasionally, they would be cursed at, but many people would laugh at them. No one here was familiar with Zhang Yan, so no one came to talk to him. He was happy with the quiet and unhurriedly followed behind the group. After leaving the celestial boat, Wang Huan changed direction and headed north. Under the moonlight, the lone peak of Divine Crossing Peak pierced the sky and dominated the moonlight. The mountains rested low in the sea of clouds like the ridges of dark beasts. It was eerie and terrifying. After traveling for an hour, it was time for Wang Huan to land in a kernel. The group of people behind him also retracted their Dharma artifacts and landed as well. Wang Huan looked around and said with satisfaction, "Everyone, this is the place." He took out a thorny cage from his sleeve. Everyone had good eyesight and could see a few white-whiskered rats jumping around in it. Someone immediately exclaimed, "It really is a white-whiskered rat." Wang Huan laughed heartily. "Of course. Do you think I'm just bragging, fellow Taoists?" Zhang Yan suddenly understood. At first, he was confused. The demon owl was brave and fierce, cruel and cunning. It was also very suspicious. What method did Wang Huan use to capture this bird? Wasn't he afraid that others would find out? It turned out that he relied on this cage of white-whiskered rats. He nodded slightly. When he was on Azure Parasol Mountain, he had read many travel books and knew that white-whiskered rats were one of the demon owl's favorite prey. They could also help the demon owl cultivate. It was no wonder Wang Huan was so confident. One must know that even though the demon owl was called a demon, it had yet to transform into a human. It was still a beast. With this cage of delicious food in front of it, it would eventually take the bait. As long as it landed in this valley, with the people here, they would most likely be able to capture it. Now that the trick had been exposed, there was nothing strange about it. However, the white-whiskered rats were extremely difficult to find. They were good at burrowing and hiding. Wang Huan must have spent a lot of effort to capture this cage. Someone asked, "Brother Wang, where did you get this cage of white-whiskered rats?" Wang Huan said loudly, "Everyone should know that I didn't find this cage of white-beard rats. There was a rogue cultivator who went to Jade Pearl Tower and borrowed a lot of magic tools in order to go to a cave abode to try his luck. However, he didn't bring enough spirit shells with him, so he used these cages to make up for it. However, he never returned, so they fell into my hands. Later on, I learned from the letter he left behind that he was an expert in raising white-beard rats." Eyebrowless Taoist, who was standing beside him, heard this and could not help but ask, "Brother Wang, this method of raising rats?" Wang Huan laughed and said, "I won't hide it from you. I've studied it for the past 20 years and have learned the method. After I condense my core, I'll definitely be able to help you in the future." Everyone was overjoyed when they heard this and praised him. Wang Huan was also proud of himself. However, at this moment, the white-whiskered rats in the cage suddenly panicked and squeaked. He was overjoyed and stopped talking. He hurriedly said, "Everyone, quickly disperse. The demon bird is here." Everybody woke up and knew that Yao Xiao had arrived. They kept their mouths shut and according to their previous arrangement, each of them found a suitable place to hide. They also closed their mouths, noses and all the pores on their bodies, not letting out a trace of their breath. Zhang Yan also went under a pine tree. He used the method of the carefree technique and hid himself. Not long after, he saw a 3 feet tall grayish-black figure flying over like a ghost from hell. Zhang Yan opened his eyes and saw that the bird had a sharp beak and claws. It had a cat's eyes and a monkey's face. It had a bunch of ear feathers and its body was covered with soft brown spots. There was a bunch of steel-like feathers behind its tail. It was surrounded by black gas and its fierce eyes were like lightning. When it flew, it was silent. The demon bird was attracted by a cage of white whiskered rats. However, when it arrived here, it circled in the air and did not land. Wang Huan looked very calm and did not show any signs of impatience. The demon bird was only good at traveling at night and was not strong in the day. Even if it did not fall into the trap, as long as it stayed here, it could still be captured. After waiting patiently for 4 hours, seeing that dawn was about to break, the demon owl finally couldn't wait any longer. It suddenly swooped down and easily tore open the cage with its steel hook-like sharp claws. Each of its claws grabbed a white whiskered mouse and was about to fly away. Wang Huan chuckled and made a hand sign. The cage suddenly split into a few vines and coiled around the demon bird's body. It immediately tied up the demon bird and dragged it back to the ground. The bird could not help but let out a shrill cry. Wang Huan was overjoyed and jumped out excitedly. However, at this moment, he saw a white smoke flying over. There was a black-robed Taoist standing on it. With a wave of his hand, the demon bird and the cage were both caught in his hand. Wang Huan panicked and shouted, "Who is it?" However, before he finished speaking, he met the cold gaze of the other person and shivered. He looked at the smoke around him and said with a trembling voice, Core Formation Cultivator. The black-robed Taoist casually glanced at him and said, "This demon bird has caught the eye of my Zhangtan clan. Here, this is your reward." He casually tossed aside a heron that had been dead for an unknown period of time, and then he paid no further attention to everyone else before he turned around and soared into the sky. Wang Huan's expression was ugly. However, it was common for large clans to bully lone cultivators. It was already good that they did not take their lives. What could he do? Moreover, he did not understand. This Shindu Peak was so big. How could this Tan clan cultivator appear here so coincidentally? If someone with some experience was here, they would know that this group of people leaked the news. However, Wang Huan was only at the 3rd level of the Mystic Light Realm. Although Wang Huan was a cultivator at the 3rd rank of the Mystic Light Realm, he had been raised by the accumulation of the precious Jade Tower for hundreds of years. His journey had been smooth and he had never been through any storms. He didn't understand the cunning of people, so he wasn't too wary of the people he made friends with. Manager Wang had warned him a few times, but he had forgotten about it the next time he turned around. At this moment, the people hiding in the surroundings were all silent. The eyebrowless Taoist's eyes flashed. He patted Wang Huan's shoulder and sighed, "Dao brother Wang, don't lose heart. There will be a next time." Chapter 257. Opening all 36 apertures, calmly absorbing medicinal intent after the golden plate entered his hands, Zhang Yan found a secluded place and focused on refining the apertures. This closed-door cultivation took an entire 2 years, and when he stopped cultivating and rested, he'd already refined the 35th aperture. At this moment, he felt his entire body heat up. The true fire in his chest was like fire, overflowing his energy ocean. With a light shake, it seemed like it was about to spew out from the aperture. He quickly suppressed his aura and slowly retracted it. In an instant, he kept the bright true fire in one place. When he looked inside, he saw that the golden fire seed was thick like paste, extremely pure and refined. At this moment, there was only one last acupuncture point left in front of him. Whether or not this last aperture could be opened and a complete true fire would be the key for him to condense his core in the future. He couldn't afford to make any mistakes. Although Zhou Chengju was a direct disciple of the Zhou clan, he only opened 32 apertures, which was already very rare. As for Zhang Yan opening 35 apertures, it wasn't unprecedented, but it was extremely rare. As for the 36th aperture, he had never heard of anyone opening it before. Therefore, he didn't know what would happen if he opened it. When cultivators cultivated, unless their cultivation reached an extremely high level, they would follow the path of their predecessors and be careful. They wouldn't dare to take a single wrong step. Otherwise, if they didn't succeed in their cultivation, it would be a small matter. If their foundation was damaged, then it would be hopeless. Even big clans and families spent hundreds of years, and just now, they were slowly figuring out another method to open apertures. In reality, at Zhang Yan's level, he had opened 35 apertures. Even if he didn't open the last aperture, he would still far surpass cultivators of the same generation. However, he was a person who pursued the Grand Tao. Now that he hadn't completed it, how could he stop because of this obstacle? He smiled and reached his hand into his sleeves. Others might not be able to continue, but he had the broken jade in his hand. He could give it a try. He reached out and grabbed the broken jade, calmed himself down, and immersed himself in it. This time, he was very patient and spent 3 months to deduce the cultivation method. When he came out of the broken jade, his face was full of energy. At this moment, he already knew that the biggest obstacle before condensing the core was no longer able to stop him. In his mind, he carefully recalled the situation in the broken jade. He smiled confidently and slowly began to circulate his cultivation technique. As he circulated his qi, his divine will condensed, so he did not notice the passage of time. Suddenly, one day, the 36th acupuncture point throbbed and a sound was heard in his eardrums. However, it was different from the previous time, as a wisp of yin qi was produced from that acupuncture point. The true fire in his energy sea seemed to be attracted, suddenly rolling up and swallowing it into his body. This wisp of yin qi did not dissipate, but instead squeezed into the inner circle, and in an instant, it pushed all of the essence fire that was originally gathered there, and forced it to the outer circle. This true fire immediately formed a situation of yin in the middle of the yang, mixing together into a ball. With a slight rotation, it slowly rotated like a big ball, indescribably wonderful. Although Zhang Yan already knew that this would happen, now that he saw that his cultivation was complete, he couldn't help but reveal a hint of joy on his face. Originally, he felt that it was a pity that the essence of the true fire was gathered into a ball. If he really used it to refine the golden core, he wouldn't be able to use all of the firepower at the same time. But now, when it came time to condense the core, not a single bit of the firepower would be wasted. At this moment, he had already opened all 36 of his acupuncture points. Zhang Yan counted with his fingers. Unknowingly, 3 years had passed. Once he got the last 2 ingredients, he would be able to find a cave to condense the core. He let out a long breath and calmed his mind. He closed his eyes and sat still, calmly waiting for the time to come. After an unknown amount of time, on this day, he suddenly heard the sound of thunder. It was caused by the yin and yang energies attacking each other above the thunder lake of Shindu Peak, causing the thunder to shake. Zhang Yan opened his eyes and a bright light flashed in his eyes. With a flick of his sleeve, he flew up from the stone platform and left the cave in the blink of an eye. He flew towards the place where the thunder rumbled. At this moment, there were many cultivators riding the wind towards the Shindu Peak. He didn't pay much attention to them and just flew, arriving at the main peak of the Shindu Peak in a short while. At this moment, his eyes narrowed and he saw a group of white-feathered, red-crowned cranes flying in the lightning. They flew back and forth around the peak, and every time a bolt of lightning fell, they would let out happy cries. At this moment, his eyes narrowed and saw a group of white-feathered, red-crowned cranes flying in the lightning. They flew around the peak, and every time a bolt of lightning fell, they would let out joyful cries. There were around 100 cranes in this group, and although they were very eye-catching, they were extremely fast. It would be extremely difficult for normal mystic light realm cultivators to catch them. However, Zhang Yan didn't care and went straight over. When the group of heavenly cranes saw that there were cultivators charging over, they were about to split up and hide in different directions. However, Zhang Yan let out a long cry, and a watercolored curtain of light suddenly appeared behind him, sweeping across the sky. In the blink of an eye, the 100 heavenly cranes disappeared. After collecting the cranes, he didn't stop at all and continued to fly towards the peak. Not long later, he saw another group of demonic birds, and without saying anything, he used his true light to sweep them in. On the way, Zhang Yan's true light of water rose and fell, and groups of demonic birds fell into the screen of water one after another, disappearing without a trace. After sweeping through no less than 1,000 demonic birds, he still didn't wave his hand. At this moment, he saw a huge and extremely fierce green-eyed golden eagle flying in front of him. Zhang Yan laughed loudly. He formed a seal and turned into a ray of green light as he flew up. This type of ferocious demonic bird had great strength, a fierce and courageous temperament, and the steel feathers on its body were not afraid of ordinary magic treasures. Normally, it would rather die than fall into the hands of an enemy. Thus, even if the cultivators who came to collect the medicine encountered it, they would not be in the mood to fight and would let it go. But today, it was completely useless against Zhang Yan. He shook his shoulder, and a deep brilliance swept over. The golden eagle wanted to resist, but how could it do so? As soon as the water curtain fell, it involuntarily fell into the thousands of rivers and was carried away by the current. Originally, the higher one went up God-crossing peak, the more ferocious the demonic birds were. Even if they weren't a match for cultivators, they could rely on their wings to quickly escape. Normally, there weren't many cultivators who came to capture them. But now that they had encountered Zhang Yan, disaster was imminent. Wherever he flew, the demonic birds were swept away. Zhang Yan thought that with these 1,000 demonic birds in hand, the hidden refining marrow would be enough, so he didn't attack anymore and flew towards the highest point of God-crossing peak. Not long after, he arrived at the top of the peak. He looked down at the surging pool of lightning, took out the golden plate from his sleeve, and threw it into the air. As soon as this golden metal object appeared, it instantly attracted dozens of golden snake-like lightning bolts. Zhang Yan activated his incantation, and the golden plate began to spin, absorbing the dozens of lightning bolts into it. Harvesting Chua thunder also depended on one's luck. Usually, there would be one bolt of essence lightning in every 100 lightning bolts, and the more essence lightning there was, the more effective it would be when condensing the core. The pool of lightning would only vibrate for an hour at a time, so if it didn't work the first time, one could only try again. But if a cultivator found it too troublesome, they could also harvest the hidden refining marrow on another day. However, compared to harvesting it at the same time, it was still inferior. While Zhang Yan was plucking the lightning to his heart's content, there were two people watching from the top of another mountain, watching his every move. One of them was the Ho clan's patriarch, Ho Baksu, and the other was a woman wearing a feather dress and holding a golden ring. This woman had also met Zhang Yan before. She was the Tao companion of Su Gongyuan from Nine Peace Cult. The woman looked at Zhang Yan, then pointed at him and asked the black-clothed Taoist next to her, "Fellow Taoist Sima, who is this?" The black-clothed Taoist thought about it and said, "I don't know this person." The woman's voice suddenly sharpened as she said, "Could it be that Junior Zhang Yan has changed his appearance and is here?" Ho Baksu coughed and said, "Although fellow Taoist Sima can't recognize him, it might not be that Zhang Yan. Lady Su, please don't be impatient. Let me ask him later." Lady Su said in disdain, "There's no need to go through so much trouble. He came here alone. Let me capture him and examine him first." When Ho Baksu heard this, his eyelids twitched, and he hurriedly stopped her. "Fellow Taoist, wait. I see this person's mysterious light. It seems to be a technique from Taihao school. You must know that this is Donghua continent, not Donghai. Fellow Taoist, you must not be reckless." Taihao school? Lady Su hesitated. This time, Su Gongyuan also warned her that it would be fine if she offended others, but if it was the 10 sects of Xian men, she must not provoke them unless it was absolutely necessary. If she was really impulsive, she would have to escape to the outer endless sea at all costs. This time, she came to find Zhang Yan to avenge her son, so she naturally wouldn't leave so easily. She said irritably, "Then, according to fellow Taoist Ho, what should I do?" Ho Boxer said in a deep voice, "Fellow Taoist Sima, as a servant under the master of this celestial market, you naturally have sharp eyes and ears. This person's technique is also from the orthodox Xian men, so he shouldn't be a nobody. Why don't you go and ask around?" The black-clothed Taoist nodded. He took out a jade talisman and stretched out his hand to grab a strand of qi, then he absorbed Zhang Yan's appearance into it. Then, he cupped his fists and said, "I will be right back." In less than the time it took for an incense to burn, he returned and said to the two of them, "This person claims to be surnamed Yu, and he appeared here 5 years ago. He seems to be familiar with the manager of the Zhenyu Tower in our celestial market." The appearance of everyone who entered and left the celestial market was reflected by the mirror at the entrance. As a servant of the celestial market, he only needed to make a slight inquiry to know the origin of the other party. Ho Boxer thought for a while and said, "Surnamed Yu. The Yu clan is a large clan in the southeast, could it really be from the Taihao school?" Lady Su said impatiently, "Since it's not that kid Zhang Yan, then there's no need to pay attention to it." Ho Boxer shook his head and said, "Otherwise, there's still something fishy about this person. To be cautious, wait for a while, I'll go and check it out myself." Lady Su was a little puzzled and said in confusion, "Then why don't you ask now?" Su Gongyuan glanced at her and said with a bitter smile, "Lady Su, you need to know that this person is collecting herbs now. If this person is really not Zhang Yan, won't I ruin his Tao if I go up rashly? If I attract the elders of his sect out of anger, I won't be able to bear it. It's just an hour, why do you need to be so anxious, Lady Su?" Lady Su blushed, snorted, and did not say anything else. While they were talking, Zhang Yan did not stop collecting the lightning. After an hour, he put the golden plate back in his hand and released his spiritual qi to explore it. He found that there were several lightning bolts rolling back and forth, looking very lively. He was also happy that this trip was so smooth, and he thought to himself, "Next, I just need to find a crypt in half a month, and I can refine the medicine into a pill." He had already thought about it in advance. Although there were many spirit-cleansing crypts in the world, the crypt where the two continents met was the best. The distance between the Donghua continent and the North Dark Star continent was 150,000 miles, which was the border between the two continents. If he used the sword escape technique and flew at a normal speed, it would take about 10 days. When he reached that place, he would have enough time to follow the map. After making up his mind, he did not delay any longer. He absorbed the spiritual qi in the golden core in his abdomen, used the minor heavens shifting escape technique, and turned into a beam of light and flew away. Su Gongyuan saw that he had finished absorbing the lightning and deliberated over his words. He was about to greet him, but before he could open his mouth, his vision blurred and he saw a ray of light heading north. In a flash, it disappeared into the boundless horizon. Target equals _blank. You're tuning into the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.